Good evening, everyone.
Recording in
It is
progress.
April 27th. Welcome to the school committee's meeting. We will begin with administrative business, the consent agenda. Would someone like to move it? Thank you, Stephen. Is there a second? Thank you, Suzanne. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, that brings us to the student report. But before we start on student report, I hear, Alice, that you are the recipient of a very prestigious award from the Girl Scouts. And congratulations on that. That's very impressive.
Thank you so much.
And if maybe you want to begin by telling us a little bit more about that award. And
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, and apologies for being late. Yeah, so I received the gold award for work that me and like a lot of other students, not just me, did on like this affordable housing overlay and like housing justice project in Brookline. So really trying to increase the number of mixed income and like income targeted affordable units in Brookline. So right now we have the Housing Advisory Board is creating, and I'm on that committee, creating a study committee to think about Cambridge's affordable housing overlay and what that could look like for Brookline. So yeah, if we need lots of community support, if people are interested in that, yeah.
okay,
Great. Now I got it. Okay, 1 second. So yeah, the past few weeks at BHS have been pretty good. We just got back from break. We've been having some fights in the lunch lines because there's new panini presses. So that's like the big thing. We have panini presses now because ever since they got the freshman building. So now there's there's a lot of conflict over that. It's a big issue here. So yeah, because they're really good. Anyways, so yeah, I'll go on to my report, I guess. Okay, So in the March 30th school committee meeting, Dr. Dubois, he shared with us the findings from the Panorama Universal Screening Survey. And I'm aware that you've all seen similar data to this before, and this was like, not the first time for you, but for me, it was really impactful and it really stuck with me. There's just like, I'll just repeat a few numbers that I was like very impacted by. He said, Dr. Bois shared that 64% of white students in grades 6 to 12 endorse strong school belonging, and that number is only 47% for Black students, 54% for Latinx students, and 43% for MECO students. And then he also shared Black students, Latinx students, and MECO students are more likely to report frequently or almost always feeling lonely, angry, or frustrated. He also shared that Black students, AAPI students, and MECO students are less likely to report feeling frequently or almost always feeling happy, hopeful, safe, and loved. And there's like a lot of more statistics besides that, but I just thought those were some findings that really stayed with me. So yeah, those numbers were like really deeply upsetting to me, and it really made me think, what does that say about the policies, the practices, and the structures, and also the culture in our schools, that we're failing to provide support for BIPOC students and like inflicting this harm. And I know this isn't the first time we've seen data like this, so I was like, that was interesting to see. Yeah. So Dr. Bra also talked about how we begin to see these racial disparities in belonging really showing up and solidifying in middle school. So I was wondering, what is it about the culture and policies in our middle schools that's like keep setting up these patterns, right? How are we allowing this, really like toxic culture to flourish? And then also like, what are the inequities in like the support we're providing along the way? So one of the biggest things, and I'll come back to this, one of the biggest things I hear from my peers just like continually whenever we have this conversation, because we talk about similar stuff to this in classes a lot, is that we really desperately need more BIPOC teachers and support staff in the building. The district's staff recruitment and retention equity policy, which I know we're going to talk about like later in this meeting, I'm really excited to see what that work leads to when we talk about that. And then something else I wanted to share was that student council conducted, we have assemblies like in every once in a while, and in January we conducted an assembly of students, and I think we received it was like, I think it was 750 responses roughly, and the findings in this, we got that the first question was, what are the two issues that you're most concerned about impacting the student body? And just like by far the vast majority, the biggest two issues that people voted for were addressing racial inequities at BHS and the BHS's mental health policy. So this like really, if there's anything that students are like consistently concerned about and really care about, it's this data and the results from this survey. So I just want to share, there's so many BIPOC-led student groups that have been doing work around mental health for years at the school. Last March, the high school's Black Student Union held a Black Mental Health Forum for Black students. Last May, our Asian Pacific American Club conducted a survey about AAPI students' experiences with racism and mental health, and there's like so many more examples. So I feel like it's time the district stepped up and made programs like these sustained and funded, because so many student leaders over the years have been like doing the work of the district. Know a bit more about the survey. While the K-8 schools Panorama survey has a response rate of 95%, the high schools is only 65%. And I'm gonna be honest, like I never did these surveys either. But seeing the results presented at school committee, I realized like how vital it is that we get a much higher rate of students completing these surveys. So I met with Dr. Dubois earlier this week, and we talked about like how are we gonna increase the high school response rate. And a big thing that we really talked about is that like a lot of students, myself included, we feel like it's like our responses are just going into a void and they're having no impact on the supports that the school offers and what's available to us. So we have two surveys coming up in the next few weeks, another Panorama survey and then the youth risk behavior survey, and that's much more about like general student health and like mental health. So we're working to get student groups and leaders to spread the word about this and spread the word that it's like super important to complete these surveys because the results are having a really real impact on the kind of supports we're receiving. So I'm like, committed to getting the word out on that in any way that y'all need. So I don't know what policies will change these numbers. I'm not directly impacted by this pain and oppression, so I'm not necessarily the person to make those policy recommendations. But what I do know is I'm supposed to represent the student body here. And I think that, this mental health crisis is deeply impacting the student body. And I think I can speak for many students when I say that addressing this needs to be like one of the top priorities of the district.
Thank you very much for that report, Alice. So a question that I have, you mentioned that you met with Dr. Dubois regarding increasing the student response.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there were any particular suggestions that either you or he came up with.
Yeah, so he created a video last week that that's like going to be played in advisory, because right now it's kind of like you sit down in advisory, they're like, do the survey and that's it. So his video talks a bit about why it's why it's important to fill it out. But what we sort of talked about is we've reached out to I gave him emails of a bunch of different student leaders who are in student government, peer leaders, and then some affinity organizations. And he sent them an email being how could I really would love your help to get the word out and try to get more students to respond to this and really push the narrative that this doesn't go into a void. This is people are seeing this. This is not a waste of your time. This is a valuable thing to do for yourself and for the students at the school. So that's the immediate thing. And then I think we're going to see those next few weeks if that has any impact at all. And I think we're going to think about okay, what are more big scale things and campaigns, and I don't even know that would get it up. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Alice? Go ahead, Stephen.
Alice, sorry if you said this and I missed it. Do BHS students know the results of the Panorama surveys? What affected you so much? Do other students know it?
No, I mean, I don't know anyone else who I have never have seen any of these before, so I don't think so. No.
I wonder if the same mechanisms that you end up using to communicate the importance of taking the survey might also be used to share out the results. And
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Also, if the Cypress might want to
That
pick
could,
it up.
yeah, definitely. I bet talking to the Cypress would have an impact. Yeah, for sure. Definitely good idea.
Thanks for doing that. Also for communicating it out.
Of course.
Suzanne?
Yeah, thank you, Alice, for doing that, for bringing this to our attention yet again. I do want you to know that this information is important to us. And it also, we're seeing it across many surveys. So we just did a
Yes.
social studies equity survey. And again,
Yeah.
it was about how do students feel that they belong? Do they feel that
Yes.
they're connected to the material? And we're seeing that kind of across the board. We had the middle grade review. So we've had lots of reviews this past year. So we have tons of data, like you say.
yeah.
So the big thing now is what do we do with that data?
Yes.
And how do we implement what needs to be done so that the results are more what we want rather than this, even at 60%, that didn't seem like a very high number.
Yeah, exactly. It's 61% of all students. That's not exactly.
That's not that high. In my mind, that doesn't seem high
No, me
enough.
neither.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so thank you for bringing it again to our attention, but again, we're just bringing it over and over, and it's pretty consistent across all of our surveys, all of our focus groups. So we really do want to take a harder look, and I think it will come up probably in our strategic planning. So it should come forward somehow in our next a plan that's going to be good for another 3 to 5 years. What are our priorities?
Definitely.
So that information will be I just want you to know that
Yeah, definitely.
that we're all trying to work together on this. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you. And I think students are also aware of this being across the board. And I think students really love, I don't know if they always are aware of the work the district is doing. So I think students, because this is such an issue I hear so many people talk about, and that being so important to the majority of BHS, I think seeing that this actually is being addressed across the board and not on a issue by issue basis, I think people would appreciate seeing that. So yeah.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, Mariah.
Thanks, Alice, for this. And I certainly feel having been on school committee for 3 years, and granted, these have been 3 tumultuous years, that we have been dealing with many different issues, but this is something that we need to get off the dime on, and it's long past due. And I'm really looking forward to the strategic plan as hopefully being filled with action steps that we can begin to take. And I know the district is working on this some, but as you say, Alice, and we've seen, and as Suzanne said, we've seen this in multiple reports. And at a certain point, it becomes very painful to continue to see it in a report, and not feel the and not have that clear sense of direction that the work will be taking yet. So anyway, I empathize with your point, and I know that, as Suzanne said, we all feel very strongly about this too, and are looking forward to next steps.
It's good to hear. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much as always, Alice. And we will now move to the superintendent's report, Spotlight on Excellence.
Good evening, everyone. I was so entrenched in Alice's talk that I didn't set myself up like I was supposed to, so give me a second. So our superintendent's report for tonight, we are going to walk through some community highlights, share where I've been in the past few weeks, walk through some important dates, and then get to a very special spotlight on excellence tonight. So we want to start by saying congratulations to 3 PSB educators named this year's recipients of the Brookline Education Foundation's Caverly Excellence in Teaching Award and the Sperber Excellence in Administration Awards. So a special shout out to the Heath team and to the BHS team. Pictured in the top here, we have Chima, Rachel, Catherine, Karen, Asa, Sarah, Liz, and myself. We have Ed, Anthony, Catherine, Rachel, Liz Crane, myself, Liz, and Karen. And then again, for the Sperber, same group, and we have Dan Bresman. So Sarah O'Shea, 6th and 7th grade ELA teacher at Heath School, won the Caverly Award for the elementary portion. Elizabeth Crane, BHS biology teacher, won the Caverly Award for the secondary level or the high school level. And Dan Bresman won or was awarded the Sperber Award, which is awarded, I think, every 5-7 years or so for excellence in administration. We look forward to congratulating them in person at an upcoming school committee meeting. And I can tell you the excitement around these awards, it's thrilling to go around and share and announce this, classes and students being involved there, as well as many coworkers. Congratulations to all of our PSB community members who competed in the Boston Marathon last Monday. Over 40 representatives from all of our schools participated. We especially want to highlight our student alumni who competed in the race. Jack Rusk, FRR and BHS, Jamie Yu, Heath, BHS, Karina DeRosa, Lincoln, BHS, and PSB substitute nurse, Lucia Westman, Lincoln, BHS, and Samuel Burrington Pierce, and BHS graduate. PSB students also competed in the Boston Athletics Association Invitational Mile and 1,000-meter event last Saturday as well. So congratulations to our Boston Marathon competitors. As in the tradition of voting next week, 6 of our schools will serve as polling locations for the town election, which will run from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Poll workers will actively guide voters to the polling locations to minimize any disruptions to the school operations. So precincts 2 and 8 will use Ruffin Ridley, the gym. Precincts 5 and 5A will use the Lincoln School gym. Precinct 6 will use the BHS Schlunch gym at 115 Greenough. Precincts 10 and 11 will use the Driscoll gym. 12, 13, and 13A will use the Runkle School gym. 14 and 14A will use the Heath School gym. And again, the election is May 2nd. We encourage all folks to get out and vote. I'm pleased to announce that Kathleen Davik joined PSB earlier this week as the new assistant to the superintendent. Ms. Davik has spent the last 10 years working as the administrative assistant to the Director of Student Services in the Monomoy Regional School District on Cape Cod. In that position, she provided assistance to the full special education team, collaborated on the implementation of a new digital testing platform, and worked collegially with central office staff on a day-to-day basis to ensure smooth functioning. We warmly welcome Ms. Davik to the PSB community. Last night, I was pleased to host a community forum for parents and caregivers to offer feedback and participate in contributing to the district strategic planning process. We met at the 22 Tappan, in the theater at the 22 Tappan Street campus at the BHS campus. Our work on the district strategic plan will continue through June, and I look forward to sharing the progress along the way. I had recent visits with Runkle, Ruffin Ridley, Baker, and BHS. And upcoming, I have Heath, Driscoll, Runkle, Lawrence, and at this point in the year, we're talking with educators, principals primarily in my case, about finishing strong, making sure everyone is getting their written feedback and all of those types of things. And then just checking on staff and how they're doing. I had a great visit today at BHS with Dr. King, my mentor. We spent quite a bit of time with head of school Meyer, and then Dr. King and I were able to walk the campus, look at much of the construction progress, as well as to speak with several staff members and visit classrooms, and active learning is happening at BHS. And so, and again, Matt is always so impressed with the facilities, and he keeps saying, Linus, this is like walking around a private university here. Very nice facilities. So, and the students represent us very well in those instances. So, for our events, we have Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We are also acknowledging Mental Health Awareness Month. Our K-6 early dismissal, our next one is May 4th and Wednesday, May 10th. Cinco de Mayo is May 5th. National Teacher Appreciation Week is Monday, May 8th through Friday, May 12th. Mother's Day, Sunday, May 14th. Memorial Day, holiday. School and district offices will be closed Monday, May 29th. And with that, I am pleased to switch to our Spotlight on Excellence tonight. We are honoring the BHS Top Chef Competition. We're pleased to shine the spotlight on excellence to the Tappan Green Restaurant at BHS and their Top Chef competition. 5 teams participated in this year's Top Chef competition. In addition to the educators who are joining us this evening, we're honored that 3 of the students who led the Top Chef team are also here with us. The Top Chef competition requires each student team to take over the Tappan Green Restaurant for a day. The teams are then responsible for every aspect of restaurant operations that day, including the menu, design, creation, order, and presenting the meals, and all logistics such as staffing and takeout orders. BHS staff vote on the Top Chef through a survey with that feedback. The voting is just wrapped up, and as soon as the results are tabulated, a winner will be announced. However, even though it's a competition and Top Chef is named, the camaraderie and sense of community that is forged through the competition outlasts any top designation. As a matter of fact, it's not uncommon for the team leads to jump in and help their competitors when they need a hand. I'll now turn the microphone over to our very capable Britt Stevens, coordinator of the Career and Tech Education program at BHS who will introduce our Spotlight on Excellence honorees this evening and tell us a bit more about the program. Britt, I pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Dr. Guillory. I'm just going to share my screen and hope that you can see this. Can someone give me a thumbs up that they see slides happening? All right. Thank you, Chef David. So we, as you just heard, are fortunate to have some students with us. We're also fortunate to have what I think is the most talented and hardest working team of educators I have ever seen in my career. I know that, but perhaps in the whole of Brookline High School. I am proud every day I get to get up and support the work that this team does in what is the most integrated and diverse program, I believe, at Brookline High. So I'm going to give you a bit of a quick overview of what our culinary program looks like, knowing that then I will give our educators an opportunity to introduce themselves. They'll tell you a bit more, and we will conclude with some of our students talking to you about the experience of participating in Top Chef. So those of you who are familiar with our program may know some of this, but the restaurant, Tap and Green, our student-run restaurant, is the work-based learning part of our culinary program. We have a catering team where students can get after-school employment to work with us as well. But it is not the only part of our culinary program. So working at the restaurant, so students participating in the restaurant, we have over 150 students a year, but we have more than 600 students in the culinary program at large, some of them preparing for future experiences in the restaurant. So you see a photo here of a work from a student in what's called our culinary exploratory class. That's a class that students take before they arrive in the restaurant, ideally, where they learn some prerequisite skills like knife work that you see here, so that when they're with us in more of a work-focused experience, they have some context of what they're doing. The restaurant is fully an operational business. You know, we're inspected by the health department in Brookline. We make over $100,000 in revenue a year. We are open many days a week, and we are thriving with our new-ish team and space. So Dr. Guillory, thank you for recognizing our work, and in particular, the work of the students. It's what it's about and what we are here for. So I'm going to pass it over to our team now and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell you a bit more about the work that we're doing.
So thank you very much. Thank you to the school committee. Thank you, Dr. Guillory, as well as Britt for introducing us. And also thank you for the team. We have a really great team of co-instructors at Tap and Green, and we really enjoy the work that we do there. So just a little bit about Tap and Green. We are a very busy restaurant. As Britt is saying, we generally open up at 7:30 in the morning, and we're open generally until 9:30 for breakfast, and then open up again for lunch. And then we have students coming in and helping us break down. So it's a very busy restaurant. This is my 21st year teaching culinary arts, most of it at the post-secondary level. And the amount of experiences that the students are seeing at the high school level rivals that of what a lot of students will see at post-secondary. So it's really good that they're getting this work experience, you know, not just learning culinary arts, but how to work in a busy environment. I think that's one of the things that's really unique about Brookline High School's program is they're able to go into a different environment and learn and apply those skills that they're learning in their other classrooms in different ways and kind of stretch their minds. And I think that's really the best thing about just, you know, getting into the workforce and doing some sort of work. So, you know, a lot of those soft skills about persistence, being able to work, even if it's just for 50 minutes or 55 minutes in the classroom, being able to come in and to persist through that time. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's really busy. And so that persistence is really important skill for the student to learn, as well as punctuality, getting to class on time. A lot of times, you know, we might have, you know, 30, 40 people already waiting in line to, for us to take their order. And so getting students there on time is a really important skill for them. And they see that. And through the Top Chef competition, it's really interesting. Just the other day, one of the Top Chef competitors was mentioning to us saying, wow, you guys actually do a lot in wrangling us every day. And that's one of the things is punctuality and getting there on time and learning that skill, which goes across the board. Cooperation is also a really important part of what they learn at Tappan Green. Cooperating with their, fellow classmates. And part of that is, sometimes it's a really, I don't want to say stressful environment, but a lot of things are happening. And sometimes they have to learn to cooperate in those kind of dynamic environments. And that kind of leads to team building, learning to work with diverse people in different situations. I often give the students the analogy that working in a kitchen is kind of like being on a boat. You are getting from point A to point B, and a lot of times you're going to need the whole team in order to kind of make that happen. All the way down to dishwashing. I know sometimes they get a lot of grumbling about washing the dishes, but I often tell them that's kind of one of the best stations because they're able to go there and kind of like focus. All you have to do is clean dirty or dirty clean, and able to kind of work with that. And a lot of students actually excel over there. And after working that station, they're like, yeah, it's actually not that bad. So they're able to kind of learn to work as a team to get that job done.
Chef
And
David,
learning
can I
how
jump
to
in and just
work under lots of demands, as I was mentioning before. Sometimes the kitchen is hot. Sometimes we're run out of a certain thing. So learning how to make those course corrections. And the Top Chef saw that. I think every one of the competitors had something that either went wrong, they had to fix in some sort of way. And so learning to kind of be cool, to kind of think what the plan B is going to be, or sometimes plan C, to be able to execute that. So a lot of those skills are really important for the students, and you can see that in our Top Chef competitors. And all of them did a fabulous job in what they were doing. And they also, students learn a sense of urgency. Again, they're there for 50 or 55 minutes. Sometimes it's really busy. There's a lot of customers, so having that sense of urgency is a really important skill to have.
So
As well
Chef
as
David, I'm going
customer
to
service
pause you.
skills,
David,
and
pause for
money
1
handling
second.
skills.
Sorry, I just want you to introduce yourself quickly before we move on because you
Okay,
didn't tell
so
us how
again, my
long you
name
were
is
with us.
David Casmino. I've been teaching culinary arts, as I mentioned. This is my 21st year of teaching culinary arts. Outside of these 2 years, it was all at the post-secondary level, between Newberry College, which was here in Brookline, as well as New England Culinary Institute that used to be in Vermont. I also used to work for Cooks Illustrated magazine and still do a lot of freelance for them. So I kind of bring in the kind of recipe testing, thinking outside of the box of recipe kind of skills that come along with that.
Great, thank you. And David is in his 2nd year with us at the restaurant. And next, I'm going to pass it to Chef Devon. You're up.
Thank you. Good evening. Chef Devon McCoy. This is my, I've been in Brookline Public Schools since 2018. I started the cafeteria actually at Brookline High School, and then I moved over to the special ed RISE program. I still work with RISE in the summer in ESY, every other summer at least. This is my 4th year also in the Steps to Success program. I do a culinary enrichment with the Lincoln School after school program, the Teen Advantage program. This is my 2nd year in the BHS restaurant. And this is my first Top Chef, and it was really exciting experience. Like Chef David said, it's just awesome and it's fun. It was interesting to see. I had fun, and it's interesting to see students their process in basically going through what we go through as well. It's really exciting. It's fun, and so proud. And it's really exciting. We had our Top Chef teams this year. We had Sam and Milo, and Sam and Milo featured Brazilian street food. These are, Top Chef competitors. Bella, who's here, Milo's here as well. Bella, who's here, she'll talk about her menu a little bit. Elijah, he did an Italian-inspired menu. Lauren, Connor, and Darren also featured Italian food on the menu. And Jesse, who's here also, who we just wrapped up yesterday, our last competitor, did a barbecue soul food inspired menu. And everything was awesome. And it was really exciting. It's really exciting to eat other people's food when you cook all the time. So
thank you, Chef Devon. Passing it to you, Chef.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here. My name is Beth Hercadelli, and I've been working in the Restaurant and Culinary Careers Program since 2014. I started in the old restaurant space and then helped develop the Culinary Exploratory Program in the years when we were online and created an online culinary program. And then now I'm helping to create the brand new space, Tap and Green. Top Chef's been an important part of the culinary program for years, and we're excited to have brought it back this year. The way it works is Top Chef is a competition where students have the opportunity to take ownership of the restaurant. They create a menu based around a theme of their choosing, hire a team of people they want to work with, and then get a day to create their menu to serve to the BHS community. We're there to support them, but we're there to support the students while they do this, but overall stay out of their way so they can lead their team and truly experience what it's like to be a head chef. Not all students want to lead a team, but many want to be involved, so they seek out a team to join, which is incredible to experience because you get to see camaraderie in a way that's different from the everyday. There's something about the busyness and the challenge that brings everyone together, even if they didn't know each other previously. And the community fills out a survey about what they thought of their experience, if they decided to participate in any of the meals. And after all the teams have gone, we determine based on surveys who won the competition. So we just wrapped up yesterday, as Chef Devon had said, and we're gonna figure out who was the winner for this year. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chef Beth. Okay, and now we'll hear from some of our students. So Bella, you're up.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Bella Jacopelli. I'm a junior at BHS. I was the second participant in the Top Chef event. And my menu concept that I chose was natural color. So my entire menu was very visually appealing, was based on the amount of color combinations I could create. And most of it was vegetarian, which was kind of by accident, but was also really interesting to work with an entirely vegetarian meal, no meat or poultry at all. Talking about Top Chef as an experience, it was definitely very chaotic the day of, though a lot of behind the scenes that not many people saw was the planning that went before. Every Top Chef team probably spent about a month planning out their menu, their day plan for the day, the ingredients they needed, who they needed on their team. There's so much planning that was involved that I really was not expecting at first, but definitely paid off in the end to have such a thorough plan. My original menu concept was actually comfort food, which I ruled out because I think I would have sent everyone into a food coma. But when thinking about the menu, I can't speak for every Top Chef team, but what I really need to think about was my audience and also just the structure of the day, what was possible, and something else that I forgot now, but there were a lot of different factors in making the menu that were difficult but incredibly fun and rewarding to make. A lot of these recipes were family recipes or recipes that I make a lot for myself at home, and it was really an amazing experience being able to share that with my school, with my peers and my teachers. And I'm sure that's mostly true for all of the Top Chef teams. I know many of the other menu items that other teams had were based on like family or cultural backgrounds, most of which were like different foods, different cuisine types. But for me personally, I knew that never would have fit because I never stick to one cuisine in my household. Everything is kind of just a mishmash of cultures and different cuisine types. But yeah.
Thanks, Bella. And Bella brings up for me one other highlight of Top Chef is we often get to meet families of our students when they are Top Chef and taste their food while they get to see their students in action, which is a fun way to engage with a community. I'm going to pass it to our final speakers, which Milo and Jesse will share the opportunity to talk a bit about what it is like to be a student at Tap and Green.
Hey, I'm Milo. I'm a sophomore at BHS, and I've been working at the restaurant since last year. For me, the restaurant was kind of an impulse decision. I want to do something in Z Block, so I signed up. And I think that was one of the best decisions I made all year, that year. For me, Top Chef actually started that year too. Me and Sam, well, Sam actually introduced the topic to me. He brought it up, and I thought it sounded like fun. Unfortunately, it got canceled that year, but fortunately, we got to do it this year, and it was so much fun. So much fun that, as you can see in this picture and the last one, I participated in 3 of them. For me, Top Chef was never really about the competition. Yes, it's a competition. Yes, there's a winner, but I think it's more about the experience for everyone. There's just such a I can say that I made many friends just over the course of the past 4 or 5 weeks working at different people's Top Chefs. And there's something really incredible about spending a day with a group of people who you pick to work with. And yeah, I guess I'll pass it off to Jesse.
Hello, my name is Jesse. I'm a junior. I've been going to Brookline for about 3 years now. 2 years. This is my second year in Brookline. I'm sorry. Top Chef. It was like, I also want to agree, it was never really about like the competition, right? It was more about like succeeding. Like it went through a lot of plan, and I just want to see that plan like go through. Restaurant is like also really great. It's like not like a class, so you don't really have to worry about like schoolwork and stuff. Just a place to like learn skills. It also helped me get my first job with like skills that I learned from the class and other stuff. Yeah. Milo.
Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. So I'll wrap us up. And I will just say, ending on the note that Milo and Jesse share, what is special and unique about our program, and Top Chef, I think, captures it at its essence, is we are a place where we trust students. Like the educators here every day have to work alongside our students and rely on them. When things are busy, students can't not engage in class, or else the educators beside them don't have the team that they need. And so there's a really special community that forms in that kind of environment. And that means that students get leadership experience and really build a different kind of relationship with each other and with our teaching team. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for recognizing us tonight and for sharing the work of our students. Look out for the Top Chef winner, which will be announced soon.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I think I speak for perhaps all of us here in that those pictures are making our collective mouths water. We're getting hungry. We're going to want you to hopefully cook for us as well at some point. Do any of you have questions or comments, school committee members? Helen.
I just wanted to thank you all for your great presentation, and also to request maybe next year, let us know, maybe we could come and be judges too.
We would love to have you, Helen, so I'll make sure that I do that.
Thank you.
Alice?
I have a question for Jesse. It's Alice. I was wondering if you were inspired by our trip last week to in your cooking.
Yeah, she's everywhere.
Yeah. All right. Our trip, it really helped me like change up a lot of things. I didn't even realize at first when I was creating my menu that I was going on a trip down south. But like it helped me like solidify like a lot of things that I want to add and like what I wanted to like ensure and how to do things.
Do you want to quickly, Jesse, describe the trip you were on? Because I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I went on a living history trip down south for a week. We went by airplane to Tennessee, and then we drove around to Alabama, Mississippi, went to different museums.
Great, thank you, Jesse.
I'm sorry. We went to different museums and different places, and I'm sorry.
It's all right, Jesse. It's all good. You answered the question. It changed your menu. It's what it sounds like.
Stephen?
Thanks. That was great. I just want to say that we at the curriculum subcommittee, Britt gave a a terrific presentation yesterday about the work that BHS Vocational Education is doing across all of its 7 pathways, Britt. And this was the most popular one, right? This is about 50% of the students are going into this pathway. My question is for you, Britt. This was, I love these presentations about all this hands-on learning that's happening at BHS. It's kind of thrilling. It makes all this learning seem really, really exciting. Makes me really looking forward to when my kids get to go to BHS. Are all of the pathways like this? Like, do they all have experiences where, I guess this is for everybody participating, like, do your classmates talk about their experiences in the other learning pathways the way you talk about Top Chef experiences? Or is there like is this like a kind of a one-off with Top Chef?
Milo, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Remember when we were on the line and I said, what would you say at the school committee when I asked you, how is this class different from
You're
your
teed
other
up for this one, Milo.
I do remember that.
Okay.
I think all of the other classes have plenty of options and tons of availability and so much to them. But I think with the restaurant, there's just something so unique about a class that's so similar to real world scenarios compared to like being in a science classroom. There's nothing quite like it, I think.
If
Are there
Edweiser is
are
in
there
the
events?
audience-
Britt, are there events on the other pathways that are comparable to Top Chef? Or is there like the like a hackathon in the IT pathway? Is there like, I mean, are there?
I believe that Tappan Green is our strongest example of work-based learning at Brookline High School. And it's been the most resourced. And it's not the only one that exists. There are other opportunities where students get real hands-on experience. But by far, the restaurant is the truest remaining traditionally vocationally structured program at Brookline High School. And I'm hearing from students and adults that more of that for students gives them more opportunities to feel the way Milo just described he gets to feel. But I don't want to speak over you students, so jump in if you have answers.
Okay, well, thanks so much for the presentation. I thought it was really exciting.
Thank you, Stephen.
Mariah?
Thanks. Thanks, Britt, and thank you to all the students who spoke today. It was really wonderful. You mentioned that there's catering available. So can the community actually like go to your website and put in catering requests? How does that work?
Yes, absolutely. There is a form that is linked to our website where folks can request catering of many sizes. I will acknowledge, because I am in front of my team and I know how hard they work, we are still growing into the demand of the catering business that we've seen. But folks hire us for anything from like appetizers that are passed and stations at a community event to a seated lunch or meal to just putting together some boxed lunches or bagged desserts for events. And one of the great things is, like Jesse described, the restaurant helped him get his first job. We get to hire students to work on our catering team at those events, and then they get paid to work with us after school or in the evening. And then they get to put on their resumes that they have that job with us as a step into a job at a catering company outside of BHS or at a restaurant. So Mariah, I can hook you up with that form if you're interested in catering, but I will say the restaurant closes soon for the year. So you got to get it in the month of May if it's happening.
I will definitely look at the website, but I also think it would be great maybe at one of our future school committee meetings that we get the chance to do catering by tapping on the green. So thank you. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Dr. Guillory.
It is my honor to present the Public Schools of Brookline Spotlight on Excellence to the BHS Tappan Green Restaurant and the Top Chef competition in recognition of the excellence and Tappan Green student-run restaurant, and with gratitude for providing BHS students with an authentic opportunity to engage in skill-based learning while also creating a sense of community and school belonging. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, you are certainly welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting if you would like, but we understand if you want to move on with your evening. But thank you very much for coming and for sharing the Top Chef experience with us.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
having
again.
us.
We appreciate it.
Next up, it is my pleasure to introduce Vanessa Belalo as the new principal of Lawrence School and welcome her to the meeting this evening. Ms. Belalo has spent the last 9 years in the Hopkinton Public School District, and we should know that because that's where the marathon starts, right near her school, I believe, both as an assistant principal and principal at the Hopkins School. She has 20 years of experience, including that as a special education teacher and liaison. Ms. Belalo's diverse background and commitment to educational equity, as well as her energy, enthusiasm, and wide-ranging experience make her the ideal choice to lead the Lawrence School in the next era. And with that, Ms. Belalo, we'll pass the mic over to you to make some brief remarks, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guillory. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to return to Brookline. It has been 25 years. I actually started my career as a Boston College graduate student, having the opportunity to work in special education for 2 years as a paraprofessional intern, first at the Lawrence School and then at the Lincoln School. So I feel like I am getting the opportunity to go full circle and return to a district that throughout my time in education as a K-5 special educator in Palo Alto, California, and then a middle school special educator in Franklin, Mass, and now as a principal of a 4-5 school in Hopkinton, the opportunity to just come back to Brookline, where I know there is so many amazing things happening. And the K-8 model is really a special model, having seen all of the different types of models for elementary and middle school. I'm firmly committed to doing this work moving forward and joining the Brookline community. Thrilled for the opportunity. So thank you, everyone.
Do any school committee members have questions or want to give a personalized welcome? Helen?
We have to ask a question. We can't just let her get off. You don't know me yet, Vanessa, but I always ask questions. So my question to you is, you said you were at Lawrence before.
Yes.
How do you see it? What differences were you observing when you visited there, and just your impressions?
So I haven't had an opportunity to spend too much time there right now. Obviously, I researched it before deciding to venture into applying for the principalship there. I think diversity has always been part of Brookline's strength, and you know, the building looks different. I had the opportunity last week to walk around, and I can tell you my first wonderings was there's no more parking lot. So coming from Hopkinton, being out here a lot further, there was a little bit of panic. Where do I park my car? So, you know, in terms of physical space, really excited to see, to walk around and feel that there's that historic piece to the building. Had the opportunity to walk a little bit through parts of it, but I'm excited to get to know the community a lot more in the future.
Yeah, we actually took down the open classroom space in that part of,
yes,
in that school in the last renovation.
I was remembering that I was working in a learning center there as a paraprofessional, and remembering going into classrooms, and yes, the open concept, that certainly is something that has changed dramatically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen?
I'll just offer a friendly welcome as a Lawrence parent and school committee member, and just want to say welcome to Lawrence. And I'm going to say Mariah should say something as well, as both a Lawrence parent and graduate.
Mariah, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to say, Vanessa, I don't think we overlapped. I think I was a student at Lawrence until 1994. So maybe we just missed each other, and I'm a current Lawrence parent also. So it's great to welcome you to the community again.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm really excited to, I don't think there's a lot of people there that were there in 97 to 98. But you know, it's still exciting to return, and Brookline's energy and passion is something I just can't wait to join.
Anyone else? All right, back to you, Dr. Guillory.
Thank you, Ms. Balelo, for being here with us. Next up, I would like to introduce Dr. Jody Fortuna as our choice for Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. She is here with us this evening. Dr. Fortuna joins us most recently from the Boston Public Schools, where she served as Academic Response Team Leader, Academic Superintendent, and Regional Academic Director. Dr. Fortuna has served both as a district and school administrator in multiple communities, including time as superintendent in the Hudson Public Schools. Dr. Fortuna brings a depth and breadth of experience coaching and mentoring administrators, developing curriculum, strategic planning, and ensuring high-quality academic outcomes for all students. With that, Dr. Fortuna.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I, too, just as Vanessa is, am so excited to be coming to Brookline and to be part of some of the great initiatives you have, such as your strategic planning process. Listening to tonight's Spotlight on Excellence just made me beam that I'm going to get to work with such talented students and teachers. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm looking forward to working closely with the school committee and the curriculum subcommittee, and to really spend some time digging in and helping Brookline realize its goals through its strategic plan.
Thank you. Do committee members have any questions for Dr. Fortuna? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question, Dr. Fortuna, but welcome aboard. I will tell people that she's already thrown herself into the role. She has met with the school committee members. She gave us 2 meetings, so we had a lot of opportunity besides the interviewing process, of course. And I think you know that we've had many program reviews with lots of recommendations and implementations, and I don't think we've scared you off yet. So I'm really looking forward to all the work that's ahead of us, and I know you'll hit the ground running, and that is great. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to making some of those recommendations very actionable for our community.
All right, so I am going to move that we affirm the selection of Dr. Fortuna as Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. Is there a second? Thank you, Suzanne. Stephen, your vote?
Yes, and welcome.
Suzanne?
Absolutely, yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah? Well, in the meantime, I will vote yes. So welcome aboard. And we look
Thank you.
forward
I'm
to
so excited.
learning more about you and working with you.
I as well. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Fortuna.
Thank you, Dr. Guillory.
And that concludes the superintendent's portion.
Were there any questions for Dr. Guillory regarding the earlier portion of his superintendent's report? All right, seeing none, then next up, we would have had public comment if someone had signed up, but we do not have anyone for public comment. So we will now move.
Just really briefly, David, I just want to thank Dr. Guillory for moving so swiftly and with such confidence at building your administration after so much turnover over the past year. I know it's been a very difficult time because you've really lost a lot of, there's been a lot of turnover, and you've managed during a period of transition. So I just want to take a moment to salute the work that you've done to rebuild your cabinet. So bravo to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for your support. I mean, I tell folks I have the best committee in the state, in the Commonwealth. They're extremely supportive and very committed to education. And I think that makes all the difference in the world for the work that we have to do here in the public schools.
All right, so that brings us to presentations and discussions of current issues, addressing issues of a disproportionality, current initiatives, and updates. So Connell.
Good evening. Thank you for the privilege of your time this evening. I think I see everyone on the screen, but I, of course, am Lisa O'Connell, and the Public Schools of Brookline welcomed me as your interim deputy of student services in August of 2022. And this evening, we're going to talk about disproportionality. I'm going to share my screen shortly. Specifically, we will be talking about an effort by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, to increase educational access and equity for our more vulnerable students, especially those identified with disabilities. And to this end, I've asked Mike Lovato, our interim director of special education for Brookline High School, to join me. And I'm deeply grateful for Mike's leadership at BHS since January of 2023 and his pivotal role in studying this disproportionality issue as it impacts our schools and students. Mike and I are splitting the presentation this evening, and I will be turning things over to him shortly with time for questions at the end. Mike, do you mind saying hello?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, Ms. O'Connell, and thank you for the opportunity to the school committee and to Dr. Guillory.
And I am trying to share my screen. Super. Super. Great. Goes without saying that the issues surrounding the topic of disproportionality are really complex. In the public schools of Brookline, we can be extremely proud of our unwavering commitment to achievement with a responsive community, a supportive budget, a talented staff, and our longstanding commitment to providing an equitable, accessible education for all of our students will never change. We're deeply committed to providing the right services at the right time to the right students. DESE's priority of increasing equity and access for our most vulnerable students necessitates DESE to identify inequities, potential inequities in special education data they collect, and to mandate shifts in practice when necessary. To this end, DESE implements a process to flag potential areas of concern regarding a wide range of factors, things like graduation rates, discipline data, dropout rates, performance indicators, as well as data pertaining to race, ethnicity, and special education eligibility. This is the focus of our presentation tonight. Okay, the computer is not moving forward. Thank you. When we consider a learning continuum, I think of it as a blueprint that identifies the essential knowledge, skills, and dispositions, academic 21st century skills, each learner will be expected to demonstrate through their educational career and beyond. And within PSB, there's a continuum to address student needs, with the challenge being to deliver the right services at the right time to the right students. And if that necessitates special education eligibility and services, we are deeply committed. And if that means tiered interventions through general education, we're committed to that as well. If that means increasing student access to all that Brookline has to offer, we're committed to that as well. At both ends of the spectrum, you see on the left, general education, at the right, special education. General and special education provide services based on need. And when the process works as it should, viable child study and student intervention processes become part of the continuum. Tiered interventions also are part of that continuum, and ongoing analysis and student progress over time becomes part of the process as well. If necessary, special education eligibility is considered with 9 eligibility categories to look at. For a student to be eligible for special education, the disability must affect progress within the general education curriculum and require specially designed instruction. Our interconnectedness with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we will refer to DESE going forward, requires a strong partnership with our schools. Specifically, DESE is evaluating data from our school's Student Information Management System, SIMS, submitted each October 1st annually as to whether students from certain racial and ethnic groups are disproportionately receiving special education services. And we are aware that PSB has been identified by DESE as a district that it has been over-identifying Black and African-American students with specific learning disabilities. This presentation has been developed to delve more deeply into this finding, to share our action steps to better understand the issues, address both challenges and solutions. And with that, I'll turn over to Mike.
Thank you, Lisa. So as Lisa mentioned, annually on October 1st, DESE is required to collect a range of data from Massachusetts schools in order to prioritize the quality of service delivery. One of these data points considers the potential findings of significant disproportionality as the district has been identified. DESE identifies disproportionality by using a risk ratio of 3.0 all the way to 5.0 threshold, which is the likelihood that a student is in a particular racial or ethnic group will experience a particular outcome compared to the likelihood of the outcome for students in all other racial or ethnic groups. A district is identified as having a disproportionality if the risk ratio exceeds a 4.0, which is the state threshold. A district is also found to have disproportionality if the threshold of a 3.0 is exceeded for 3 consecutive years. This is the scenario that the Brookline Public Schools is in. This slide highlights the DESE definition of race ethnicity in 5 specific areas: Black, African American, white, Asian, Hispanic, and multi-race non-Hispanic. These are the DESE categories identified. For the October 1st deadline, our school district collects and interprets data from Aspen. This is our online information system for families and students, and SIMS, which is our student information management system. Data submitted is specific to the categories identified that Lisa had mentioned in the previous slide, interpreted in conjunction with the 5 racial and ethnic categories. While we will talk through other disability categories, specific learning disability is the focus because of the disproportionality data point, which was identified as a 3.0 in a risk period for a consecutive 3 years. The flow chart is it's a process in which DESE draws their conclusions, and it allows the districts to understand the subgroups and how they're identified to be able to take them through. And it takes you through an understanding of what the small subgroups are, when you can identify them, at what point are they too small, how to consider them, and when they would not be considered and an alternative risk ratio would be considered. Yes, thank you. This slide is a racial and ethnic eligibility data categories, a roll up with 3 data points. This does not include the specific disability, but it's the entire population of students with an IEP within the district. The slide highlights why Brookline was assigned a disproportionality designation. Our risk ratio has never exceeded a 4.0, but a 3.0 or above for 3 consecutive years leads to the same at-risk designation. The second point will note a jump in risk ratio during the 2021 school year. This was our pandemic year, and the risk ratio was impacted by a significant decline in student numbers. This was also a year DESE marked all districts as being in compliance, no matter what the risk ratio was identified to be. The third point is a determination for the 2023 school year, 22-23 school year will come out in July 2023. We do not know our designation as of yet, but we do project the outcome. Our current calculation is that the risk ratio will be a 3.02. However, we identified in our data submission that we are taking steps to correct. If DESE accepts our updated data, then our risk ratio will decline to a 2.99, and we will no longer have the disproportionality designation. If terms and action steps, in terms of action steps, the first thing that we did with the disproportionality finding is there's a fiscal obligation to take administrative action, including an allocation of funds. The purpose of this mandate is to address the disproportionality by targeting expenditures for specific activities such as reviewing and revising policies and practices, procedures, and as well as other action steps. Our second action step was to establish a study group. Our third step was to initiate an internal audit, followed by a review of internal student cases by sampling the record. Since school districts identified with significant disproportionality are required to reserve 15% of their total IDEA B funds, 240 and the 262, so this is the IDEA B grant to include preschool, to provide for comprehensive and coordinated services to identify and address the factors that contributed to the identification of significant disproportionality areas. To this end, we solicited assistance from the New Teacher Center, experts in pre-referral, purchased and implemented dyslexia screeners for grades K through 2, and supported MSAN and a calculus project initiatives. The partnership between schools and the organizations listed above meet DESE requirements for provisional development and educational and behavioral intervention services and supports for addressing disproportionality. Here is a list of the team we put together because we knew this was an issue and wanted to better understand the issue and its roots. We started with a smaller team, but then we realized the work and the solutions involve more domains. We grew the circle. In the upcoming year, we will continue to grow our group as we have interested teachers and community members who are eager to participate. Our internal audit drilled down the data for the past 3 years, but the purpose of this presentation, we decided to spend a little time on data from last year, 21-22 school year. In this slide, the risk ratio is a balcony view of the bigger picture, not broken out by disability. This is coming next. There are important data points here. While only 6.4% of students at Brookline Public Schools are African American, 36% of those students are in special education. Similarity for our students categorized as Hispanic, PSB has 11.4% students with 28% categorized as special education. We were interested in learning more about this pattern, so we took a look at this year's as well. So, transitioning to this current school year, 2023, this data slide continues to provide a balcony view of special education. Some highlights that we're going to point out. Black African American students at PSB remain high. The percent of Hispanic students remain high. The Asian population has increased from 19.5 to 20.7%, an increase of about 300 students. And the risk ratio for Black and African American students have decreased overall to a 2.30 to a 1.94. This slide really puts everything together, and drilling down to race and ethnicity data by disability category, you now see DESE's designation of Black African American students with SLD diagnosis. And if we remind ourselves that the 4.0 risk ratio threshold serves as a warning, the risk ratio of 3.0 for 3 consecutive years results in disproportionate designation. Projecting what the district's finding will look like in July of 2023, a few things to mention. Our initial data analysis suggested the risk ratio of a 3.02. Any decline in disproportionality is a favorable sign. 3.23 in FY22, 3.02 in FY23. We also know that 2 students were identified with the wrong eligibility determination. These students were designated as having a specific learning disability, and they did not.
Sorry, can I ask a question on the previous slide? Just a point of clarification. What do those numbers represent?
Yes, definitely. So what we did is we break them down into categories. We identified the most common disabilities, which are specific learning disability, communication, health, autism, emotional, and intellectual. So we ran the risk ratio in each one of these.
So those are
categories.
risk ratios. All
Yes,
of those
sir.
numbers are risk. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. All right. So as I was mentioning, we also identified 2 students that were wrongly eligible, that the determination of eligibility was incorrect. These students were designated as having SLD, and in fact, they did not. If the disability breakdown, this should take us to below a 3.0, which would remove the disproportionate status designation. The fourth part of our action plan was sitting together, review a sampling of case studies. We will be doing much more of this, as this was very beneficial to understand the problem. What we did find, we found that students, sorry, my screen froze, I apologize. We did find that there was a lack of coordinated pre-referral practice within the child study and study interventions, some inconsistencies. We found that the interpretation of formal and informal assessment data with some inconsistencies, and we need to provide some additional training. Variability on eligibility diagnosis, another area of PD. Guiding principle, least restrictive environment was not considered in some cases, and we need to come back to the table for additional training. And there's limited general education options to address the skill gaps as an alternative to special education. And at this time, actually, am I doing this slide, Lisa? I apologize. Yes, I am.
I'll jump in.
I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Well, as Mike had mentioned previously, our internal audit highlighted room for improvement with regard to data collection and submission. And I wanted to start by saying a few words about how that might happen. As most of us are aware, Aspen is our online family and student data management system where families register. And then there's SIMS, our student information management system, and they nest together. And as an example, if registration data were to change over time, but there's a delay in updating SIMS data, or if a student's eligibility for special education were to shift, but there is a delay in updating an administrative data page, then the SIMS data, which is our reporting tool for both federal and state reports, will be inaccurate. Regarding the case study review, I want to be extremely transparent about the challenges and solutions identified. Mike started to talk about this, but there was a lack of consistency between child study and student assistance teams across schools, differing practices, procedures, level of documentation, and oversight. All good work being done, but different. We came to realize that within school-based teams, there needed to be some shifts in how we think about student engagement and achievement, as well as additional professional development to support IEP teams in becoming more consistent with interpreting assessment data. One team might look at multiple data points and conclude a specific learning disability. Another team may conclude a different diagnosis despite similar assessment results. So with the best of intentions, a student with fluctuating attendance and grades may be perceived as having a disability, but might actually be impacted by significant transportation challenges, for example, or a student whose profile is characterized by some sadness or social isolation may not necessarily have an emotional disability, but may simply be missing robust opportunities to participate in Brookline clubs and extracurricular programs that may increase their social connection and sense of belonging. At the beginning of the presentation, I hope I highlighted Brookline's commitment to individualized programming for our most vulnerable students and the commitment to ensuring educational progress with a high bar of achievement. And while this remains a challenge, I hope to walk through 5 specific areas where we believe solutions can be found. I've listed them here, and I will be speaking to each one on a separate slide. Our first solution focus was identifying the data components of a quality control system to ensure accurate collection and submission of data going forward. To this end, we've already introduced some of those quality control steps that allow for routinized procedural adjustments, real-time updating of data, and more. We've introduced a peer and panel review of data to ensure accurate data collection, and we're also analyzing the data in new ways before submission so that we can predict potential risk ratio findings before we receive a summer letter. For our second solution focus, our district has had the support of the new Teacher Center this year, who have partnered with all our schools over the course of the year to address every aspect of the pre-referral process, creating consistent child study and student intervention team approaches, reviewing and analyzing historical student data, observing actual child study team sessions, establishing consistent procedures, developing templates, retraining teams. Keeping in mind our guiding principle, we want to provide the right services at the right time to the right students. The partnership between OSS, Teaching and Learning, and the Office of Equity and Inclusion cannot be underestimated. Our interconnectedness is key to this initiative. And while our goal is not necessarily reducing special education referrals, the CST-SIT focus does include possible consideration for a range of general education options and opportunities, rather than immediately pursuing a special education evaluation as the one and only solution. And going forward, staff will now have procedural steps, templates, as well as instructional resources for tiered interventions that can address potential skill gaps, social emotional support, access to counselors, social workers, and more. Our third solution you are seeing on the slide above suggests a visual for communication and collaboration pathways going forward. From a data perspective, we've talked about action steps to get back into DESI compliance, but our goal really is to improve educational experiences and processes for all students, to provide a rich academic experience and to ensure progress for all students over time. Special education eligibility is certainly one way, but this slide reimagines a pathway, so to speak, of what the process might look like before we automatically engage in special education. There is a belief for some, we found through this internal audit, that a label of special education eligibility increases the support we can provide to students. And this may be true, but we're also learning that for some later in life, these labels can stigmatize some students and in some cases impact development and a sense of belonging. But we're grappling with best practice. What is the best pathway to help a child? Is it to diagnose a disability? Does it require the provision of a safe but separate space where specific needs can be met? For some, that's exactly what is needed, and we will provide it. But at the same time, when we think about a specific learning disability as an example, this is a particularly complex diagnosis because interventions for this specific disability are generally about remediating an area of weakness in math, reading, or math. and it takes place outside of the general education classroom and most often takes a student away from accessing grade level curriculum. This work has led us to the conclusion that we need to think more about how much time we're removing students from the opportunity to access grade level curriculum over the course of a school day, time spent outside of the general education classroom. And we've identified that one way to work towards this goal is to increase our use of screener data. Alice talked about Dr. Dubois' work with our social emotional learning tool. This is a great example of using screener data and taking the time to evaluate that data over time. Specifically, the district has also purchased MClass, the screening tool for dyslexia for grade K2. And we are considering expanding this screener for grades 3-8 as well, and piloting other screeners as well. Our goal is to routinely utilize these screening tools to measure student progress to instruction and measure progress over time and receive direct feedback in real time. And finally, our fifth area of focus is to highlight the district's strategic planning work. This has been exciting work with many stakeholders at the table. Our strategic planning has been collaborative, practical, contextual, future-focused. There are many factors, and working on them concurrently and as an interconnected team has been essential. Much work has been done to promote racial equity and inclusion in our district for both staff and students, and all of our strategic planning has kept this work central in our minds. This will continue. In the area of teaching and learning, we've been discussing what a cohesive pre-K through grade 12 standards-based curriculum would look like and the impact of such an approach. Would it increase student exposure to grade level learning? Would it narrow the achievement gap? Would it ensure appropriate tiered instruction? In the area of culture and climate, we think about fostering a learning environment that provides social, emotional growth and support to all students, routinely assessing social emotional learning, that sense of belonging, trust, attendance in the process of learning, continually analyzing and expanding other district screening tools that help us understand the mental health of our students. And there's also community engagement, systems, processes, procedures, and budgetary planning. Much more on strategic planning by the end of the year, I'm sure. As I conclude, a few thoughts. How we as an organization bridge perceived gaps between student groups is a significant challenge. All of our students, our children, are unique. There's variability of student achievement, which is highly individualized. And that is why special education law and regulations are about that level of individualization and about ensuring progress. This is why we lean into special education as a solution, because it is. And to provide the right services at the right time to the right students, we also have to consider ways to provide or expand an individualized approach coupled with high expectations to all students that don't automatically remove vulnerable students from the grade level curriculum for lengthy amounts of time during the school day. Whether a student has special needs or not, they certainly have unique needs. And to this end, we need to consider additional opportunities for bringing parents, guardians, and students into the conversation in new but meaningful ways. Why is a student's attendance inconsistent? Why is completing homework a challenge? Why does a student appear disconnected from their learning? There may be a handicapping condition, but perhaps it's something else. We learn through this process that we may not have enough mechanisms in place, for example, for our Metco students to truly access the richness of the Brookline experience. We talked about whether a host family to a Metco student who wants to participate in an after-school club or sport would support that student. We talked about how we might offset transportation challenges from Boston to Brookline with attendance accommodations. Can we leverage technology in new ways? Our pride is about working together towards student success. And we're grateful for a supportive budget, a talented staff, a supportive school committee. The task at hand is to create a learning continuum for each domain that has been determined as important to helping students meet graduation expectations, stretching from pre-K through grade 12 or age 22, with a clear indication of what it means to advance upon mastery. We've recently resurrected the term, the portrait of a graduate, which I know has been discussed in prior years. And in thinking about the definitional elements of a competency education, this is where our district is working to create a transparent set of explicit, measurable learning and social emotional objectives designed to advance student learning. We're a learning organization and we are learning every day. And by looking at how we're educating our children and providing new ways of providing services at the right time to the right students, I believe the DESE compliance factor will take care of itself. I thank you for the opportunity to serve the public schools of Brookline. I thank my lucky stars every day for the opportunity I've been given to be here. And Mike and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that presentation. There's a lot of information there, and I'm sure that the school committee is going to have a lot of questions. So who would like to start? Go right ahead, Helen.
Well, I'm not sure this is, this was an interesting factor when I was looking at the statistics on page 9 and 10. And something that really struck me, in addition to the, the disproportionality of African-American students, was also the disproportionality of Asian students in that they're not represented. Are we missing kids who should be, identified? And maybe not. Maybe 8% is the right number, but it was interesting to me that we went up 300 students and went down in identification. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Mike, did you want to jump into that?
Sure. One of the things that I will say is with the recommendations that we made in regards to cleaning up the SIT, CST model, that'll start to give us some true numbers, what every one of our race category and disability categories look like. Some of the impact may be that our referrals are cleaner, therefore we have the data to really understand what academic growth looks like or what it does not look like so that we could identify that a little bit more effectively. There's not an average that the state gives us as far as a recommendation of what the risk ratio should look like. So it's hard to compare ourselves to be able to say this is a threshold the state says we should be in. Now, work that we did not do that we can, I don't know how much we'd be able to access the data, but we can see if there's a possibility to compare to some other neighborhood districts that may have similar demographics with us, or at least numbers to be able to do a comparison.
Sure, Lexington and Newton would be very interesting to compare to. And do we know nationally what these numbers usually look like?
No, I do not.
If you look in the literature, what is the percentage usually of students 15 to 19? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Suzanne, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. Could we go back one slide? I think that one. So I kind of understand the risk factors. I don't know how they reach it, but I understand that 3 is like getting into trouble, and 4, you're in big trouble, and 3 for 3 years, you're in trouble. But even given that, let's look at the first line at 1.94, which would say, the state would say, I guess, we're not in too much trouble. But if that's still 35.6% of that population has an IEP, that feels very high to me. We were just saying here, we think it's nationally something like 15 to 19% of children overall, general, everybody has IEP or maybe a 504. So I'm still reacting to that 35.6%. That's still, even if we're under that, 3.0, it still feels too high to me. Is that right? Is that the way I should be thinking, or am I getting confused about? And Hispanic 28.4, that feels high.
Can I just piggyback on that and put that in a broader way? Do we have a problem? And if so, what do you think the problem is?
Well, let's just first ask, am I reacting the right way? Is that too high still? I mean, it is,
Yes.
right? Okay.
It is.
Okay.
Yes, yes. And when we consider the percentage, even just looking at our Metco students, that almost 40% of Metco students have IEPs currently. And that really, has led us to the initiatives that I described, because yes, Suzanne, you are looking, these percentages are too high.
So here's where I kind of get hung up a little bit. So I think it's the learning continuum, which is the slide before that. Is that true? No, I guess it's not. It's early. That one, thank you. So a couple of things. I suspect we're not doing this child study team meeting to define our tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. I would guess maybe that a teacher says, oh, somebody's having a little problem, could somebody come in and do a little intervention without it being purposeful or specific, and not going through a child study team. Is that probably true?
That's a growth area for us, absolutely. I mean, we're delighted to have Dr. Fortuna coming in soon, because as I mentioned, that partnership is just critical to this process. That we know that tier 1 is about core instruction, but tier 2 and 3, these are growth areas for us. Yeah. Absolutely. And they're not just academic growth areas. I think that I was trying to make a point that we really need to be concurrently thinking about attendance patterns, a student's sense of belonging and connectedness to the Brookline community, the opportunities that students may or may not be able to take advantage of because of logistical challenges. There's a whole host of issues that may not be addressed by a determination of special education.
Right. And so the 2 other things, if I could quickly, you mentioned quickly inclusion, but that may be a growth area for us as well, is what I'm suspecting. And inclusion is along that continuum, but even at the far end with an IEP or 504, you still can have inclusion. So it's not as if you're at this tier 4, which doesn't really exist, but that's what I'm calling it. And now you're out of the classroom, but that you can have inclusion even with the IEPs and the 504. So I suspect that's an area of growth for us as well.
I'm quite proud of the work that has been done to enhance co-teaching models across our schools. That is absolutely a growth area, but the commitment to those co-teaching models have been highly effective for addressing the unique needs of our students. The designation from DESE around the specific learning disability as I had said, it's very complex because if a student is diagnosed with a health disability, even an emotional impairment, an intellectual impairment, the focus in programming is to push in to general education opportunities. With a specific learning disability, because of the heavy focus on remediating that weakness, generally the programming requires removal to provide intensive small group or individual support. And the unintended consequence over time means that that student is becoming more and more distanced from grade level curriculum.
Right.
And therefore potentially disenfranchised with school, because none of us want to work on our weaknesses 3 hours out of a 6-hour day. And so somehow we have to be more creative about how we provide service delivery. I believe that the shifts that we're making, that the DESI designation, the risk ratio designation, will go away in this area, but then we now are able to anticipate where the next area will be.
And so thank you for that, because I think the model by definition has one focus on weaknesses and the need for interventions rather than strengths and how that might help you be successful. That's not just us, that's everywhere around. When you talk about special ed, you say, what is the disability? What is the problem? Not what are the strengths and how do we look at the whole child? So I know you know all this, but I'm just saying that I'm agreeing with you that we need to really take a look at, who provides the support and how do we identify the strengths of a student and teach through those strengths and just recognize those strengths.
To
And
Suzanne's,
make sure there's a balanced day where a day is balanced for a child.
to Suzanne's most recent point regarding not looking at the strengths of students necessarily, is there a concern that by not looking at the strengths, those strengths over time will become weaknesses? And is that something that gets assessed?
I think one of the value of the screening, the social emotional learning screening tool, is that we get that information in real time from our students. And so we have an opportunity to step in, intervene, shift practice before things get worse. And that's why we're talking more and more about increasing the use of screening tools, but not just purchasing them and using them, but making sure we're routinely looking at the information we're being given throughout the year so that we can intervene before we're in a crisis situation.
Stephen?
Thanks, David. First, I just want to thank you for this presentation. The school committee, since I've been on it, has been hearing about significant disproportionality in special education. We have been requesting figures that from DESI findings, and we haven't received them, much less seen a year-by-year finding from DESI. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that we've been presented with a chart of what DESI has found from Brookline since I've been here. So I really appreciate being able to see Brookline's record. So thank you very much for that. So I have a question and a comment. My question, first of all, is can you please give us more information about 3.02 to 2.99? What's going on there?
You want me to jump in there, Lisa? Yeah, so one of the things that we did is when we looked at the submission that took place, we pulled every one of those kids. And so to better understand the data that we were submitting and to really determine if we needed to make any changes with the data submission, well, I did share with the team that we need to get in there and really look at the disability category, compare it to the IEP, confirm that what we submitted to the state is 100% accurate. So we took every single student that was identified as SLD and the category of Black, and we evaluated their IEPs and we evaluated what was actually submitted to DESE. So with that being said, we did find 2 students that were submitted on the October 1st deadline incorrectly as SLD when they should have been submitted as a different disability. Now there is some challenges. It's not as easy as we say it right now for what those disability categories look like for submission. And I'll give you an example. Parents do have the right to reject an IEP. They do have a right to view the IEP. So if we have an IEP the day before October 1st, we have to make a projection as a district for what that submission should look like. And so if that disability category changes in that time frame, well, then we got to be able to go back and have a process for what that looks like to clean up before it's finalized. Now, DESE does give us a window for cleaning up data, but part of the process that we worked on and that we're trying to clean up now, as far as what that resubmission would look like so that we can correct that. But in fact, that will take us down to a 2.99, which would get us out of the at-risk category of anything above a 3.0. And that would take us back to remove the disproportionality category if the state allows us to make the correction on the data submission that was already certified.
And I'll just add, and Mike, you're being a little bit humble here because it wasn't enough for us just to focus on specific learning disability because that was DESE's data point finding. We went through every child in every disability category because we needed to understand exactly how Aspen nests with SIMS data and how SIMS data is reported to DESE and then how it's analyzed at that level. And we just had to keep peeling the onion so that we fully understand it. Now we have, thanks to Mike, a template that we're using that in real time, we really have the risk ratio for every disability category going forward, and not just the disability category, but any other of the data points that DESE is looking at. So I have so appreciated Mike's work in this regard. So we've been learning too. We wanted to be sure we understood it before we shared with all of you our findings.
Okay, thank you for unpacking that a bit. So my other question / comment is much more general. So we know that the risk ratios broken down by race should be close to 1 for each category. And our disproportional risk ratios come from the fact that we're misidentifying students. We're referring students who we shouldn't be referring for special education. And in the case of Asian students, we're under-referring, even though that's not identified as a problem by DESE. We are under-referring Asian students to special education. So what I didn't see in the solutions was any discussion, and we also know from our previous presentations that if you break out students by race, there are disproportional experiences of inclusion and belonging, and that we also know drives behaviors and academic achievement. So surely those factors those behaviors are being misunderstood or misinterpreted as special needs or contribute to that misunderstanding. So what I expected to see in the solutions was some retraining or some importing of a methodology to help better identify students with special needs. But I didn't really see that. Can you help me understand?
Sure.
I feel like I'm putting this in a really raw way because I don't have the language, but that's what I expected to see first and foremost.
Well, I think you're making a very important point, Stephen, if I understand, and I'm looking at the learning continuum here, that there's tier 3 interventions which some examples of a tier 3 intervention, it might be individual weekly counseling for a 16 to 20 week period, or the development of a behavior support plan for a student. This is a growth area, a training area, because a tier 3 intervention is a general education intervention, but we often see those kinds of services immediately designed into an IEP with an eligibility determination. I think we're going to see with the intensive training that we committed to this year with the new teacher center for our child study and student intervention teams, will have a much better understanding of those tiered interventions and steps that can be taken before automatically considering special education as a solution.
And Lisa, if I could add, a big piece that Lisa did mention as part of the solutions, I think really addresses the problem that you were mentioning, which you're spot on. It's really looking at the progress that students are making during the referral process. And that's one of the areas that the district is focusing on for training and creating some consistency. So that will help teams to really study and look at when to make a referral, what that looks like. A student may be behind, for example, on grade level academics, but if they're making sufficient progress, that's not a referral kid that we would want to, send for special education evaluation, but we'd want to continue whatever we're doing. And so that is a preventative measure for over identification or for over referring, but it's also a method that really helps teams to understand tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and really the differences between the referral process and regular education, and the difference between when special education is critical.
Andy?
Yeah, thanks. Could I ask about a slide 11 in particular? I don't know, Betsy, if you're able to go to that one, because there's some numbers on there that are actually pretty amazing. Two more, I think. This one. Yeah.
Back one.
Back one?
Okay, the previous, yeah, this one. So I'm looking at the first 2 rows there. And if those numbers are not misprints, then this is saying that a Black student is 60 times more likely than an Asian student to be identified with a specific learning disability, and 20 times more likely than an Asian student to be identified with an intellectual disability.
Mm-hmm.
So those are even disproportional relative to the other disproportionalities. And I'm wondering, what is it about those categories that leads to such a wild imbalance there, and whether the proposed solutions have taken into account that we're doing something particularly not good in those particular categories.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to jump in, Lisa? Yeah, so one of the things that I would say is that unfortunately there are some statistics that show that there is some achievement gaps already. If we don't have assessment tools that be able to provide the real-time data to really understand the progress that's taking place as we're attacking those achievement gaps and making corrections, we're going to continue with misidentification, as you're seeing here on the table. We all know that regardless of who we are, what we look like, that we're all capable of the highest achievement without question. And so, but it's important to really understand that there are reasons for gaps, achievement gaps. They're documented, they're well researched. And so as a district, and really a responsibility regardless of where you are, really understanding progress of what that looks like on closing the achievement gap is really the critical tool that we need to pay attention to. Hispanics and African Americans continue to be steady. That is a trend that you see nationwide, unfortunately, but there is a difference when you look at Brookline, when you compare it to neighborhood schools and what that looks like with African Americans, especially, and Hispanics. There is some consistencies statewide, but the African Americans is a little higher in Brookline compared to some. But it is important as an indicator, I will add that, to one of the things that I think is powerful that Brookline is paying attention to is we have it, so we need to name it, and we need to have these discussions in the teams. We need to name it at schools. We need to name it in the classroom, name it during the CSTs and ISTs so that we can address it.
And I think that while DESI has provided this risk ratio threshold, for us as a disproportionality study group, we internally said that certainly any risk ratio over 2.0 is an indicator for us, and that we put in some quality control processes. Now that we can get that data real time, we're not, we can be less reactive and take a more holistic approach to addressing these issues.
Mariah?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, Mariah.
Hi. I have a couple questions, and maybe I missed this. I was having bad audio a while ago, so I had to switch devices. But can you explain in layman's language what a risk ratio is? Did you explain that and I missed it? In which case I apologize.
We breathed over it, yes.
Okay, sorry. Do
No
you mind
worries.
repeating it?
So what I will say is that it's a statistical factor to be able to help the team understand at what point we should be paying attention to it when students are identified under the disproportionality or the identification too much compared to other race factors and other disability factors. So I would say the best way to understand it is it's an identifying number that provides us with information to say, what does the comparison look like to other disability categories and other race factors? And it gives us the opportunity to be able to identify if it's too low, as one school committee member was mentioning. We have one there that's 0.4. We need to pay attention to really what's going on. That gives us kind of a flag to that 1.0 number. That is really your number that we should be at around those areas. I think it's important to also understand with the risk ratio, the state does have a couple of areas that they can change. So the state does identify the risk factor for what that looks like in Massachusetts. That alone is not a federal requirement. The disproportionality is. So this looks different in one state compared to another. But that's I would say that's the most.
Okay, but let me ask the question a little bit differently. Is the
Okay.
risk ratio, like, say that there's one group that has a 35% IEP ratio and another group that has and then the overall is 17.5. Is the risk ratio 2 at that point, or is it some other number than 2?
Oh,
Is it,
okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's
you
so
don't have to give me the exact number, but basically, is it like a straight relationship, or is it more complicated than that?
it's more complicated than that.
Okay.
So, like, for example, I would take the total African American students identified with SLD, and then divide it by the total number of SLD students, and then I would then divide that formula with the total number of non-African American students divided then by the total number of non-African American students identified with SLD, and then that gives me the risk ratio.
I see. Okay. So I guess because one of the things that I'm sort of baffled a little bit in this presentation is that it feels like the first bit of it was about how, and maybe I'm sure this wasn't your intent, but I'm going to tell you how it read to me, is like that we have less of a problem because we went from 3.02 to 2.99. And I'm sure that wasn't the intent, but that's the way it read to me, was like, look, it's okay. Or, it's less of a concern because we are not technically maybe being caught by DESI or tagged or whatever, flagged by DESI for noncompliance. But I know, and I just want to say, but I'm sure that everyone here agrees that that was not the intent of that part of things at all, right? To imply that there was anything that was less of a concern before or after the presentation than there was before. One of the things that I was surprised, and I felt like it was sort of talked about, but not really talked about, was just implicit bias. And what we're doing about, I mean, there are people who are putting students into categories. You talked a lot about processes and double checking and such, but at the end of the day, people are making decisions that are disproportionately under or overrepresenting students. So can you talk a little bit about the professional development for implicit bias and how that will connect to or feed into some of the other guardrails that you're putting into place on this?
Yes, and I know Janae is here this evening and has been part of our group work and extraordinarily helpful. Hi, Janae. Around this issue, obviously, teaching and learning, equity, OSS, we are completely interconnected in addressing this disproportionality issue. And certainly being quite new here, Janae is probably in the best position to talk with us about there have been many years of work addressing that and still more work to come. And I hope that our other initiatives will support the work that's been happening in a more targeted way. But Janae, are you able to speak to that a little bit?
Sure, Mariah, thank you for saying that. That's absolutely the truth and what we've been talking a lot about. So as we think about training, which we have been doing, but it's really important for us to name it here and continue to acknowledge and own the fact that these numbers, as Andy pointed out and as others have pointed out, are jarring and absolutely true and have been true for years in our district. And so much of the racial bias that comes into play, whether it's in teachers' classrooms or in CST meetings, SIT meetings, very well-intentioned educators, and yet there's a ton of work that we were doing and continue to need to do around these biases, what it means to be culturally proficient educators, that kind of thing. It's an ongoing discussion. We have to name it. I know that Mike said that. We have to constantly name it. Some of the templates that I know OSS is looking at and thinking about when we go into these SIT and CST meetings, deal with that, naming it right away, and then dealing with this overrepresentation as well as the underrepresentation. So 1000%, I really appreciate that you said it. And this was implied in this presentation, but certainly we want that to be very clear.
Can I add on to that? Can I make a suggestion that solution number 5 perhaps can be solution number 1 in this, because it's the only one that really gets to the root of the issue. And maybe solution number 5 can be more explicit, that an action that we can take under OSS is to include, or maybe to prioritize, implicit bias training to those that make the referrals, since that seems to be the action that could really impact where the decisions are made. What do you think, Lisa?
I certainly, strategic planning, our work is very much in progress, but I think that makes great sense.
Thank you.
So a question I have around
David, I didn't get the chance to finish. Is it okay?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mariah.
That's okay. Thank you, Janae and Lisa, for the response around implicit bias. And I absolutely agree with Stephen that it was mentioned earlier and it should have been on slide 5. And I agree that slide 5 should be the first recommendation. The other thing that I would like to see is that we don't use DESE outer bounds of acceptability as our own bounds, and that we define what appropriate risk ratios we think are truly sort of appropriate due to random levels of variation in year-to-year variability versus things that actually indicate a bias or something along that's some sort of disproportional reaction, and how we define that ourselves, so that, and again, thinking about how this ties to strategic planning and to what ultimately our data indicators of success are going to be. And I would like to understand that as well, because I think using the 4 and the 0.2 sounds like it's beyond what we really think is probably acceptable. especially given that DESE even says 3 several years in a row is not acceptable. So what are the more narrower bounds of appropriateness that I would like to know? And then past this, it sounds like we've been looking at DESE definitions, which appear to focus exclusively on race and ethnicity. And I would be interested as well when we look at disproportionality across, for example, socioeconomic status and what we're doing on that front as well. So thinking more expansively about our more vulnerable populations and how we can identify that. Those pockets of inequity as well would be really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So a question I have around communication-based IEPs. Do you look at data regarding English language learners and how that might impact certain diagnoses?
Yes, certainly.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Also, in terms of crafting broader solutions, one of the early slides mentioned Edwin Analytics. My understanding of Edwin Analytics is that includes a lot of longitudinal data. And I'm wondering what specific data are you looking at within Edwin Analytics? Are there certain metrics that you look at? Could you offer any more specifics there?
We are currently discussing broadening our disproportionality study group. We want to make sure we have more general education teachers as part of the group. But the Boston Public Schools actually have had a study group focusing on certain Edwin analytic data points. As I had mentioned, DESE is looking at a broad range of data, and I think we want to do some talking about other breakouts of data that we can study and analyze that will help us better address the needs of our students. So we're looking at that now.
Okay. There was a mention in one of the slides that there are limited general education alternatives to special education. Did you look as a factor at, well, I'm sure you did, differentiated learning within the classroom? And to what extent does that perhaps capture general education alternatives to special education? And maybe that goes into the co-teaching you spoke about earlier.
Exactly what I was going to say. That certainly the co-teaching models support the principles of differentiated instruction. But I think we also have to look at some practical logistic issues, our attendance data, reasons why students aren't able to get to school to participate, not being able to stay after school, that sense of belonging data. We need to look at that, the whole child, and how we're supporting the whole child. And not, as you mentioned, I think many of you mentioned that we don't just want to respond to a DESE finding because there was a finding. We want to make sure we're providing the right services at the right time to our students. And we have created our own indicators within this data analysis so that we can be better.
And to that point, I appreciate you mentioning that for the district 2.0 is actually the figure that maybe not necessarily targeting, but we want to make sure that we're below 2.0 if we can. And then one last question I have, you mentioned low stakes formative assessments. Could you describe what that might look like?
Well, yes, that also speaks to teacher practice and how teachers assess progress over time with students in day-to-day instruction. And certainly Dr. Fortuna, Dr. Weissman, we're all beginning to talk about those commonalities in classrooms in terms of different ways of assessing students in real time.
All right, thank you. Alice?
Okay, so I heard you mention, I think like 3 times about the thing about like transportation, especially in regard to METCO students. And I hear that a lot at school from like kids at school. I know last year there was like this student METCO, it was like a METCO student advocacy group, and I might be mischaracterizing some of the stuff, but I know one thing they talked about was like excusing tardies around like being late because of transit. I know that was I can like put you in touch with those students. I don't totally know the full picture, but I would like I don't know, I think students would be really excited. And another thing they talked about was the after school activities and like you can't do any after school activities because of a lot of factors. So I'd love to like hear more about the whole transportation things. I knew you mentioned that multiple times. I think a bunch of students would be really psyched if like that was a thing. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. We've been talking to some students, and certainly our METCO team have been part of this study group as well. And it did come up that if we could address some of the transportation constraints, whether it's accommodations for tardies, as you shared, Alice, or whether it's transportation options so that students could stay, whether it was for after school support from a teacher or a club or participation in a sport, coming up with some practical logistical supports may go a very long way for our METCO students to increase their sense of belonging in our schools, being able to access the richness of a Brookline education. And that's why I also mentioned the host family idea that had been suggested as another possible solution, that if there was an option for a student that was staying late, had a way of getting home or even staying with a host family overnight or on a weekend when there might be extracurricular sports and travel, that some of these logistical solutions may address some of these social emotional areas that we're very concerned about.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
So just a quick piece, because I remember when my kids were in school, there was a late METCO bus in the elementary schools, at least, maybe not at the high school, but in the elementary schools. Do we no longer have that?
I think we need to look into the whole transportation piece. And I think Malcolm and Kendall are very much a part of talking this through, and we can come back with
that's
ideas.
fine. That's fine. And the other piece too, at that time, now I'm talking ancient history, but we also had METCO partners
Nice.
at Runkle, at least. I'm not sure if some of the other schools had it, but each student was partnered up, I think, with a family. I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but that did happen. So
wonderful.
I mean, there's precedent for both of these, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
All right, anyone else with questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for this presentation. It was definitely chock full of very important information, and I'm sure that we're going to have many more questions in the coming weeks and months ahead, and we certainly look forward to further progress in these areas.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
All right, that now brings us to discussion and possible votes on 2023 annual town meeting warrant articles. And we are joined by Lisa Cunningham and Wendy Stahl, who will be presenting warrant article 15.
Hi, I'm Wendy. I am the chair of the Zero Emissions Advisory Board, and I'd like to share my screen with some slides, please. I'm just pulling them up. Now, hold on, sorry, I know.
And hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Cunningham, and I've been working on this legislation for the past almost 4 years. And know many of you, and it's really nice to be here tonight.
We are not the petitioners of this article. It is being sponsored by the planning department, but they were unavailable at this time. So as Lisa has much experience on this topic, we thought that we would be appropriate substitutes for the actual petitioners. As a general introduction, warrant article 15 allows Brookline to participate in the 10 community fossil fuel free demonstration project. And Lisa will go into more detail.
Sounds great. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be here. So about a month ago, once again, the United Nations International Panel on Climate Change told us what they've been telling us for several years, which is that in order to avoid catastrophic climate failure, we need to stop using fossil fuels immediately. They also made it very clear that we have no time to waste. Every delay that moves us further away from meeting our climate goals, even by just a few months, is an untenable path. So that's the background, the global background and the political background for what we're doing. And next slide. And then in terms of the background of what we've been doing in Brookline, in 2019, Brookline passed a fossil fuel-free construction bylaw prohibiting the installation of new fossil fuel infrastructure in new and major construction. Brookline's ban was the first outside of California, the first in a cold weather climate, and the first to include major renovations. This was voted in a near unanimous vote by town meeting because we proved that this was practical, cost-effective, and also imperative. So unfortunately, Brookline's bylaw was subsequently disallowed by the Attorney General's office. While the Attorney General said that she supported the policy objectives of this bylaw, she found that the bill conflicted with legacy state laws put in place decades ago to protect the oil and gas industry. However, many communities, including Brookline, have been working very hard and have organized and pressed forward and passed home rule petitions to ask the state legislature for the authority to mandate fossil fuel-free construction in new buildings and major renovations. Next slide. So fast forward to the spring of 2022, a program for a bill for which was a program for 10 communities to enact their fossil fuel-free mandates was included in the 2022 Massachusetts Climate Bill and subsequently passed into law in August 2022. It's administered by the Department of Energy Resources, and it is built on the recently released new state building codes. Specifically, it takes the recently passed specialized energy code that Brookline passed in January 2023 and eliminates the pathways that use fossil fuels, leaving only the all-electric pathway. And it requires these requirements, which we've already met, and to pass a fossil fuel bylaw, which is what we were doing today. So the requirements that we have already met are we've already passed a home rule petition in 2020, and we passed the specialized energy code, excuse me, in January 2023, and we have met our 40B requirements as of December 2020. So next slide. So warrant article 15 is based on the model bylaw that DOER, Department of Energy Resources, propose that all 10 communities adopt. And it is very close to what we passed originally in 2019. The state actually copied our legislation, but now it is attached to the building code and it requires the commensurate improvements in the new building codes. So you can see that the base code is sort of the bottom layer, then the stretch code, which is automatically adopted by every single of the 300 green communities in Massachusetts, of which Brookline is one. The specialized code builds on top of that, and that's what we adopted in January 2023. And the fossil fuel demonstration project just goes one step further and allows one of the 3 pathways in the specialized code. Next. Thank you. So the major difference between our original bylaw and this new bylaw is that it does not exempt cooking. We did not want to exempt cooking from our original bylaw, but at the time it proved to be too big a political lift. But 3.5 years later, we now know that even more than we knew in 2019 about the harmful effects of gas, not only on our climate crisis, but on indoor and outdoor air quality and poor health outcomes. And as some of you have noticed, this information is getting out in the mainstream media. We have a staggering public health crisis that is due to our use of fossil fuels. Poor air quality from the burning of fossil fuels is associated with higher rates of disease and death throughout the Commonwealth, falling disproportionately on poorer communities. Gas stoves emit dangerous levels of nitrogen dioxide, methane, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, and benzene, and produce air quality that is not allowed outdoors. Gas stoves leak even when not turned on. In Massachusetts, 1 in 8 children have a asthma diagnosis, and in environmental justice communities like Boston and Springfield, that figure jumps to 1 in 6 children. Gas stoves are attributable to about 15% of childhood asthma in the Commonwealth, equal to having a smoker in the home. Next slide. So back to our movement. There are now 14 communities who have passed fossil fuel-free home rule petitions. 10 passed before the climate bill was signed into law in August of 2022, and another 4, including large cities with big environmental justice communities, passed immediately thereafter, including Somerville, Boston, Salem, and also Northampton. Due to the 10 community cap, the first 10 are prioritized with the current wait list of 4. There are 5 towns bringing forward this bylaw in Springtown meeting, and we expect the 2 cities of Newton and Cambridge will follow soon, with the last 2 towns in the fall. Lexington and Lincoln, as you can see here, have already had their town meetings and recorded near unanimous votes. So back to warrant Article 15, and what does this have to do with our Brookline schools and our students? Well, just about everything it has to do, but I will just highlight a few points. First of all, as you all know, our schools in Brookline are already being constructed fossil fuel free. We also need to make these projects net zero, so we'd love to talk with the school committee about that another time. This will mandate fossil fuel free in all our new and major construction and protect our community from expensive retrofits and increased carbon emissions. Sadly, this is not going to decrease our carbon emissions because we are talking about new construction projects. Thirdly, we voted this in our community with near unanimous votes already 4 times in town meeting, starting with our original bylaw in the fall of 2019, then followed by our home rule petition in 2020, and then followed by our zoning bylaws in 2022. We now have an opportunity at last to make this a reality. Going fossil fuel free, as I've outlined with the health aspects of burning gas, immediately benefits children and our community at large and makes healthier and more resilient buildings. So once again, thanks so much to the school committee for having us here tonight. Really appreciate it and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Lisa and Wendy. Any questions for the presenters? All right, seeing no, okay, go ahead, Helen.
So I'm just curious, what is, to get into these 10 communities or to be part of it, what do you get for it? I agree you get, cleaner air, but other than that, I mean, is there some sort of, I don't understand it all.
Well, you get the ability to go fossil fuel free. So now there are many communities that want this ability, more than 10, more than 14.
Why can't you just do it?
It's
Because
prevented by the state.
It's not state law yet. We are trying to make it state law, but is currently the cap. We have an unfortunate cap on the number of communities, which is now capped at 10. There has been a bill introduced into the state legislature that it would expand this cap to any community that wanted to participate. The votes to passing home rule petitions to participate this have been, again, like Brookline's, unanimous or nearly unanimous. And it's really unfortunate that the very large cities with very large environmental justice communities like Boston and Somerville and Salem, which is also a gateway community, and again, have passed these home rule petitions almost unanimously or unanimously, are being prevented from reaching their climate goals, and they are continuing to dig the hole deeper because, as I mentioned, this is not really improving our carbon emissions problem. It's actually just not making it worse.
But to clarify, anyone can voluntarily go fossil fuel free right now. What this will allow us to do is to mandate that all new construction and major renovations are fossil fuel free.
I can also add too that throughout the Commonwealth, I'll have to look this up. I could put it in the chat or email the committee later, but that there is a huge movement throughout the Commonwealth of schools that have already gone net zero. So schools have been leading the way in terms of all electric and net zero construction throughout the state of Massachusetts. And again, what's good for our children and what's good for our schools is also good for us. And so, yeah, happy to answer any more questions.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
All right, then why don't we address which warrant articles we would like to issue statements on and whether we want it to be an endorsement, an opposition, or neutral. So why don't we take this one up first since we have the presenters here. So what are members' thoughts about whether the school committee should offer a statement on warrant article 15? Stephen?
I strongly think we should endorse it.
I certainly agree. I see you nodding, Suzanne. Andy, Helen? All right, so why don't we take a formal vote then? So Stephen, would you like to move?
I'd like to move that we endorse it in full.
Okay, I'll second. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yep. Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah?
I'm sorry, I don't have great audio, so I didn't hear the whole thing, so I'm gonna abstain.
Okay, and I vote yes. So we will indeed be issuing a statement of endorsement by the school committee for warrant article 15. And thank you very much for coming and presenting and answering our questions.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Can I just also say, Wendy, somehow the ZIAB invites have dropped for me. I'm supposed to be the liaison, but I'm no longer getting those invitations. Would you mind resending them to me?
I will see if I can find the person who can do that.
Thank you very much.
All right, so other warrant articles that we considered. Article 7, which is the annual FY24 budget appropriations article by the advisory committee. I think we are certainly going to want to issue a statement on that. So I'll go ahead and move it. So a second.
Which one are you doing? Which you?
Article 7, the FY24 budget appropriations warrant article.
Which amount is that?
So
It doesn't give an amount.
It does not, but the advisory committee did approve both the our base budget request as well as the override request.
Right. Okay.
Now
So this is both of them. That's what I was asking.
there's still the potential that maybe there could be some tinkering after the fact. If that were to happen, we could always submit an additional statement as part of the supplemental. So
what are you moving, David?
I move that we endorse the Article 7 budget appropriations article, both for our base budget as well as for the FY24
David, can I
override
make
budget.
a comment on it before we do that?
Sure, go ahead.
I personally don't want to, I don't think we need to submit a statement endorsing until we have clarity over the budget balancing and the $1 million that advisory has added to other budgets but hasn't added to ours. I wouldn't want us to make a motion on this. So I would wait.
Well, I think the issue is in order to get this in on time, and they did already vote in favor of it. So yes, it's possible that they could change that after the fact, in which case we could submit a supplemental. I'm just a little worried that if we don't endorse acceptance of our proposed budget, that might come off as quite strange at town meeting. Ellen?
Yeah, there's a point to what you're saying, certainly, and maybe you're right. When is it due?
I'm not 100% sure. Do you know, Betsy?
Okay. The other piece, I mean, we do know that the House budget has increased, the House Ways and Means budget increased the allocations for cities and towns. And I'm wondering if we vote this now and the monies increase, what I mean, certainly we could vote the increase, but that's just something else to keep in mind. But this number will continue to fluctuate probably until town meeting.
Right, so
After.
instead of an endorsement, another option is to issue a statement, and we can say something to the effect of, at minimum, we are appreciative that the advisory committee is recommending, and if it ends up higher, then great.
Yeah, and we would be grateful if it ended up.
Even more
Yes.
appreciative.
Okay, so why don't we take that approach then? So it's not a straight out endorsement, but we issue a statement where we essentially say that we appreciate that as our floor.
What is our floor?
The budget that we submitted that advisory committee voted in favor of.
But the thing is that there is a town election that happens next week that affects the dollar amount. I don't want to, I personally would not vote this week on anything relating to warrant Article 7 until we get through next week. And we can always submit something in the supplement, and then there aren't two things floating around in the meantime that may not agree with each other, that might be sending mixed messages.
That's true. We're going to know soon enough about the override budget.
And we have a meeting on the.
Right, and on the 4th. I don't think that would be too late to put that off to the 4th. Okay. Everyone okay with holding off to the 4th?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So then let's look at warrant Article 19, which was to create a Brookline Black and Brown Commission. Now, we did invite the petitioner multiple times to present, and we haven't really heard back. So perhaps there isn't, I'm just assuming, maybe there's not a lot of interest in a school committee statement on it, so I don't think we necessarily have to opine then.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think we should not opine on it.
Okay. Does anyone feel strongly in the other direction? All right, then why don't we let that go? Then there's warrant Article 20, which was to amend the menstrual hygiene product access bylaw of the town's general bylaws. That was the warrant article that Rebecca Stone presented on at a recent meeting. I would certainly be in support of issuing a statement on endorsing it. How do others feel?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I second it.
Stephen seconds. Stephen, your vote? Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. And that's it. So it looks like for this year, for the spring, we will be making statements on Article 15 and 20 of endorsement, and we'll revisit 7 next week. All right, so that brings us to school committee actions, 2024-25 school calendar, first reading. Dr. Guillory?
Thank you. You all have a draft of the 24-25 school calendar in your packets. We've discussed this a little at the workshop and have gotten a little clarity on some of the questions that were asked about the early release days and those types of things. And so, Betsy, was that memo put in the group for all or not? Was not, okay. So I'll read some of the responses about that, and then we're way ahead on this one, so we do have time to make adjustments. But in the lower portion there, one of the things that we did add, and you can see the addition of the Category 1 holidays as well as the Category 2 noted in the notations there. And the questions about the early release days, the teachers union contract does call for the 4 K-6 early release days in the fall and then again in the spring. There isn't contractual language around the 7 through 12 release days, but those have over the past years been utilized for curriculum meetings and those types of things. And so it's an opportunity for us to get greater clarity around the use and intentionality of those. And then again, we have the 5-6 conundrum, the 6th grade conundrum around those teachers that work that have both 6th and 7th grade responsibilities on those release days. So we will continue to have conversations around that with the OTL team, but wanted to give you all some time to react to at least the addition of the holidays at the bottom there. And then we'll also have to come back with the beep notation. I think at this point, beep will be at full day mode. So the beep notation there may move out. So this is where we are on our calendar at this time.
So for beep, they would get out at noon as K to 8s do.
Or when we go to full, when we go
Right,
to the full day.
for this year. That's this year, isn't it?
Yeah,
Well, this,
yeah,
this
this calendar,
that
yeah.
we're looking at. 24, 25.
24, 25.
This year, next year.
Yes, but that's the calendar we're looking at. Yeah.
Mhm. So we'll have some work to clear that up,
Okay.
but that's the intention there.
All right, any questions, comments?
Any other additional suggestions for inclusion here as well?
Just one thing that struck me is how late April vacation is this year in 2025. At first I thought it was a mistake, actually. As I looked at it, I thought, gee, why is it so late? But then I looked at the calendar and actually, yeah, the 21st is, but I never remember Patriots Day being that late.
I have one little suggestion, which is just that if we could have the link to the document that will explain what category 1 and category 2 holidays are.
Yep.
Okay. And
Anyone
then
else?
sometimes we say category 1 holiday and sometimes we say day of low attendance, but aren't they the same thing?
That's, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe just aligning the wording and then including that link would be great. But I think it looks really good. Thank you for all the work.
Anyone else?
I think you moved the June 20th as the last day. Didn't we have it the next Monday? So you did some kind of magic.
No, we were trying to, that's where it was. We were trying to
Get it before the 19th.
19th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
But unfortunately, we can't make that happen.
Right, okay. At least they're not coming back that next Monday.
We'll try to keep our tradition of no snow days.
There you
although
go.
The kiddos won't appreciate that.
All right, so next up, Mariah, review and possible vote of FY 2024 user fees.
Thank you. I don't think you got anything in your packet about this, right? There's nothing in the packet for this?
No.
Okay. So for those of you who were at our last finance subcommittee meeting, which I think was March 29th, we voted the user fees at that meeting. It was actually our 4th discussion of user fees. It had been going on since early February. So extensive conversation that went over 4 meetings. And there was also significant offline conversation, particularly with the extended days. So I'm gonna pull up sorry, I should have asked all this before. Do you want me to go through this in detail or should I just go through the motions, David? What do you want me to do here?
I think up to you. You can just do a quick overview is fine.
Okay, so sorry, let me pull up the document that has the motions in it.
There's quite a bit of discussion around the extended day, was there?
There was, yeah, there
Okay.
was. So I'll start by saying that a lot of the focus was on the conversations of the extended day. I met with them multiple times outside of the finance meetings. They also participated in our finance meetings. And we had a lot of discussion around what should the model be that is fair to all the programs. The current payment model that they have charges by the square foot and the rates are very, very different program to program based on the population of students within that or attending that school who are low income. However, that is not necessarily the population of students who attend the extended day. So there was a lot of discussion about how to bring building use fees for these programs in a way that was more equitable. And we had also discussed reducing the rent or the user fee, building user fees for these programs proportionately with the number of students who are on full or partial scholarship or who are participate in the state voucher program. So at the end of all the different meetings with them, we ended up at a building use fee of $110 per student as measured by their capacity, which is their licensed capacity with the EEC. And so I think that the motion here would be for the school committee for the fee to be $110 per EEC capacity student in FY24 with a fractional reduction in rent for students in the program who are on full or partial scholarship or using a state voucher. And I also actually should just say that this subcommittee voted unanimously in favor of this user fee.
Is that of a certain date?
It's their EEC capacity is determined every 2 years, I believe, although they can request off cycles on it. But basically, you can go to the EEC website right now and see what their capacity is. We talked about originally, we talked about their October 1st licensing or their October 1st headcount, but their EEC licensing should be fixed before the start of the year.
Stephen?
Mariah, can you give some more detail? I haven't been to these finance subcommittee meetings. What's the impact of this and how is that determined?
What's the impact of this on finances or on the programs or on both?
What are any impacts on this? What's the purpose of this?
The purpose of this is that our building expenses have gone up significantly, and building utilities and maintenance are a significant expense right now. For these programs, the change in revenue that we're discussing is relatively small. And so currently they pay 1.7% of their revenue on rent, and this would change it to just over 2.1%. For us, it would bring in an additional $25,000 that would help contribute to the significant utilities and maintenance costs that the buildings have. And the other benefit of this is that it would provide a much more equitable fee structure for all the different programs, because some are much higher burdened than others are right now.
So we're adding a new fee for these students.
No, the fee already exists.
Fee already exists, so we're changing the fee amount.
Correct.
So we're
So
changing the fee structure or just the fee amount?
we're changing the fee structure altogether, and as a result, it goes up by about 25%.
I think some programs will pay more than they currently do, and some will pay less.
Correct.
And the programs themselves are in favor of this?
Correct. The other
Why?
things that, well, I think that there is significant benefit to them as well. And the other part of this, which I haven't discussed yet, is talking about revising the lease, giving them some guarantees of space minimums and space attributes.
That's great.
Yep. And then the other part of this, which will be it's not necessarily part of the vote, but it is something that I would like school committee to formally request, which is that policy subcommittee takes up with OSS, OTL, and BEEP a policy or guideline on equitably providing after-school support for after-school programs that take in children with significant needs, because currently some programs receive support in terms of additional staff that's provided by the school, and some programs don't. And so it would be much better to have a standard guideline or policy in place that allows these programs to understand what their financial responsibility is and what support they can get from the school. because some of them are paying for additional staff and some of them aren't. And again, it's a question of equity and providing access to students. So this is all tied into better quality of programming for better sort of quality of programming for the staff who participate in these programs, for the students, improving our access to or our ability to pay for some of the increased utilities and maintenance costs, and just a better sort of collaboration and working relationship all tied up into one, which also doesn't excessively burden any of these programs because again, it's a very small fraction of their overall revenue. Continues to be a very small fraction.
And when would this take effect?
Next year.
Any other questions? All right, Mariah, do you want to formulate the motion?
Sure. So the motion is that the school committee or that Public Schools of Brookline set a building user fee for FY24 for the extended day programs of $110 per EEC capacity student, with a fractional reduction in rent for students in the program who are on full partial scholarship or using a state voucher.
All right, Sarah, second.
Second.
Thank you, Andy. Stephen, your vote?
Abstain.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, now we're going to talk about Brookline adults and community education. Go ahead, Mariah.
Yep. So we had an extensive conversation with Michelle McGlone, who's the director of BASE, and Arthur Conquest, who's chair of the advisory board for BASE. And Michelle reviewed the status of the BASE fund balance. And essentially the program will more or less break even this year, but they do not have any sort of financial cushion. And so the discussion after hearing the update from Michelle, the subcommittee voted to recommend to the full school committee that we would waive the building use fees for BASE in FY24, but that we would want to have a fee proposal for the following year. So that's was unanimous, 3 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions.
What's the total cost of that waiver for them? What would that have been?
That's an excellent question because the whole thing was very all over the place. We were talking about multiple cost structures. The highest cost structure that we talked about was, I believe, 120,000. But part of the complexity here, Stephen, is that BASE before the pandemic was paying a lot more because we thought that they had a large fund balance, but it turned out that large fund balance was actually an accounting mistake and there was no large fund balance. And so, and now we're going back to what makes sense and what they can afford to pay. And the original calculation that Matt had come up with was 120,000. They don't have the ability to pay that. I had come up with a much smaller one, but the reality is they don't have the ability to pay that right now either. They just do not, like we would, in the same way last year, we had to backfill into their revolving fund. We would essentially be in that position of taking the money out of one pocket, putting it in the other, and then putting it right back again. So there's just no point at this point. But we did specifically want to have this resolved for next year. Hopefully they'll be in a better financial position at that point. And so that was the goal, is to have staff talk about and to propose to us what would be, and that would be A&F staff working with Michelle on what would be an appropriate fee structure.
Thanks, Mariah.
Sure.
Suzanne?
Yeah, just to remind me, Mariah, this is just for property that belongs to the public schools, right? I mean, if they have classes in a church building or something, they would still have to pay rent for that.
I guess that would be governed by whatever the agreement they have with that other location. Right. This is just for PSP buildings.
Right. Thanks.
Yep. So
All
the
right.
motion for this one is for the school committee to waive all building use fees for BASE program for FY24.
Okay, I'll second it. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I also vote yes.
And I'm going to skip to the fourth vote for a minute and then come back to the third vote. The fourth vote was at the, it turns out that we had never made a determination for the current year for base user fees. And so given the status of the conversation we had, we didn't take a vote because it wasn't docketed for the subcommittee, but I would make the motion that the school committee waive the current year fees, building use fees for base as well.
I second it.
All right, Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I also vote yes.
Great. Okay, then the last area was proposed hourly rates for multiple other programs, and I'm not going to pull up the whole table, but there is a large extensive table that breaks down the costs for different room types and custodial support by the hour, parking lots. Basically, it allocates different pricing to all of the types of rooms, including special rooms like, you know, the auditorium at the high school or other sort of one-off rooms. There is unlike previous years, there is a rate that's basically a for-profit rate, and then all of the other rates are a fraction of that. And we consulted with Brookline Music School. We consulted with other partners, with Lauren Bernard, who's the director of DASIP at Ruffin Ridley, who runs an enrichment program, and talked about the rates. And from the people we consulted, it seemed that generally there was acceptance. There are some new enrichment programs that that had not fully been consulted yet, and I think we were going to talk to them, but I'm not sure. I didn't get an update from Matt before this meeting, so I apologize. I missed that. I should have looped back with him. But the committee did vote unanimously to recommend the proposed hourly rates that were there for the FY24. But we did say that we would go back to the after-school enrichment programs. And again, I did not check in with Matt before this meeting. It slipped my mind. So I don't know if we want to hold that one until we get that feedback, or if you want to vote it tonight anyway.
Go ahead, Andy.
Mariah, do I remember right that the enrichment programs at Lawrence, Driscoll, and Heath currently don't actually pay any fee?
Correct.
And so this would be something completely new for them. So I think
Correct.
it is important to at least let them know before we vote something like this.
Yeah, and Matt might have. I just forgot to deal with that, for which I apologize.
All right, so why don't we move that potential vote to the May 4th meeting?
Okay, sorry about that. I'll fix that.
Nope, no problem. All right, that brings us to Public Schools of Brookline Equity Policy, Staff Recruitment and Retention, second reading and possible vote. So on this one, I want to give a special thanks to all three of Janae, Val, and Andy, who did the primary drafting of this policy. The two main changes since the first read, if you look on the first page under number 2, section B, community building, the bullet of train educators to confront and challenge biased, racist, and xenophobic behavior at the moment it occurs, especially in group settings, was added back in with the language slightly adjusted to not be necessarily a mandate for educators to do something in every moment where there is a biased, racist, or xenophobic episode, but for at least there to be a training that takes place so that educators will understand and know how to confront those challenges. Because most of this policy is around staff recruitment, retention, training, etc. The other major change is number 3, which you can see on the second page, under outcome measurement, where there's a formal reporting process that will be in place so that the school committee will have a formal presentation by December 31st regarding what the diversity metrics are with our workforce, and that in addition to that, the subcommittee on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice will actively work with PSB administration in reviewing the progress and having ongoing discussions about how to continue to progress in that area. Any questions? Stephen?
Yeah, Dr. Gillier just wanted to make sure that the dates for the third section worked for you.
Yes, when Janae and I looked at this, reviewed it earlier today, I think this is about the time when we typically make this.
Yeah,
staffing.
I know that was the intention. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure that you felt that staff time would be available to produce those reports. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
that's
you.
good.
All right, so Andy, would you like to move the policy?
It would be my honor, yes.
Okay, I'll second. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I also vote yes.
Nice.
All right, that brings us to subcommittee and liaison reports.
I think it's me.
Go ahead, Helen, capital improvements.
Yes, thank you. So unfortunately, we had to cancel the scheduled capital subcommittee and tried to schedule a second one, but didn't get it posted in time. So I decided that it was important to move ahead with the summer work part of what we were going to discuss, and met with staff, both Matt Gillis and Charlie Simmons, along with Mariah Nobrega, and the four of us discussed the summer work, the timeline, the estimates that have come in. We're talking now about trying to spend close to the $1 million that was appropriated through the CIP for the schools in terms of renovations, et cetera. I think in that meeting, we determined to concentrate on schools that were closed during the summer, or anything that was an emergency certainly would happen, but and Lincoln School is one of those schools that will be closed this summer, along with Runkle. And the plan at this point is to really refresh the whole first floor of Lincoln School. Some of you may or may not know that actually there's a new stage now at the Lincoln School, because the stage had water on it, could not be sanded anymore, and needed to be redone, and it actually looks very pretty. So hopefully in September, coming back to school, you'll see a refreshed, at least first floor. In talking with Mr. Simmons, we're hopeful that the following year we'll have even possibly a larger CIP allocation, because we will be out of one of our leases, which was part of what part of the CIP has gone to in the past. So then we would start to work up on the other floors, which probably wouldn't be as intense, or wouldn't cost as much, because there's not as much work that would need to be done on those floors. So that was the meeting. We will have a meeting on May 9th, and that meeting will be discussing the CIP from this year and what has been done to date and how much is still left in that CIP budget. Charlie will be talking, and hopefully some update on the timeline, costs, and exactly what we will be doing for the summer work. I think I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Helen, if I
Yes,
may.
please.
Principal Denizio asked if he could be included in the summer work cycle piece, because the Lincoln School summer gardening is also kicking off. And they would want to make sure that they had access to continue doing that work, or figure out some of those pieces.
We met, okay, I didn't, thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, you just sparked my mind a little bit. On Wednesday, I actually went over to the school together with Mr. Simmons and Mr. Gillis, the principal, and Sarah Gooding, and some of the possible contractors for the work. And we all sat and talked together about it and the timing of it and who was going to be talking with the principal. So he was certainly part of the conversation at that time. There was, I mean, and that's always been the case. Actually, that's usually my first question at Building Commission. Does the principal know you're doing this at this time? My bigger concern actually has to do with the high school and graduation, and Hal and the contractor being aware, because they're going to be doing street work around the high school, and graduation is on June 4th, I think it is. So that's actually, I mean, it's certainly, Lincoln is a concern too, but the high school graduation is one that is concerning. But I think I heard at the Building Commission that they have been in communication with him. So you might want to follow up on that.
All right, thank you, Helen. Suzanne, curriculum?
Yeah, hi. We, the curriculum subcommittee met on Tuesday. We had two main topics. The first topic was Britt Stevens talked to us about the Career Tech and Ed overview, and it's a fabulous program. You could see that tonight. That was just a piece of it. She did give us some figures. 1,553 students are enrolled in the program, in the courses. That's seats that are occupied. And of those, 662 students are actually engaged in at least their second, maybe their third course of that area, which is a pathway. So it may be culinary pathway, maybe, she says a bunch of them, technical skill proficiencies. And so anyway, so there was a lot going on. It was really exciting. We met over at the Tappan Green, so that was fun. We had little treats. And she's very busy right now. As you know, she came tonight. So we thought perhaps she might want to come in the fall and give us an overview of the program. It's wonderful opportunities, lots of hands-on. And okay, Helen, what do you want to say? Add? Oh,
I just thought it was a fantastic presentation. I mean, the excitement on the part of the staff for what they're doing there was just, I mean, and we were in the space, which made it even, more special. So
very appreciative of the new facilities.
Yes.
I mean, it's wonderful. The kids really like it. The staff loves it, and it was a good place to be. Stephen, did you want to add something?
No, it's great.
Okay. So we'll do more of that, but we're thinking the fall. Things are kind of getting busy now at the end of the year. And then our second topic was a review of the equity audit for social studies. Again, there was a lot there. It's grades 6 to 12. There were, they gave us an overview of findings, some recommendations. It's quite in depth, and we are going to ask them if they would come. We were thinking May, but I think it's not going to be presented to the teachers until beginning of June or something, Betsy, so we may want to do it in June if we can. And so I won't go into all the details now, although there is a report that's available. Right, Betsy, that's report's available? Yes. And you should take a look at it. There weren't some big surprises, but there are certainly areas that we need to address. Right, Stephen?
Can I just?
It was bleak.
Sure, go ahead, Helen.
I'm sorry, I forgot one other piece. I spoke today with the OPM from the Pierce School Project to set up a meeting for hopefully May 9th. I think we need to meet either way, no matter how the vote comes out, if the vote is positive, then, what is our timeline? What are we doing? Where do we, next steps? If the vote's negative, what are our next steps? We have 10 days to get back to MSBA to tell them what our plan is if the vote is negative. If it's positive, then we just go along with their procedure, and that's what we would be discussing at the meeting. So I just wanted to give people a heads up on what the thinking and where we're headed.
Yeah, and David, could I just say our next curriculum meeting is May 16th, and we're going to be looking at summer programming.
Okay. All right, Andy, I'd like to cover diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Yeah, so Val asked me to update on that. So there was a joint meeting on April 13th of the DEIJ and policy subcommittees We finished refining that equity policy on staff recruitment and retention that the school committee just passed a few minutes ago. There was some discussion about a possible student section of the equity policy. So Val and Janae had tried to do some work on this, and they concluded after many discussions that everything that might go into such a policy is either already in some policy, or it's procedure and not policy, or it can't be mandated because we can't guarantee funding and staffing to follow through. So it seems like there will not be a student section of that policy. There was discussion then about new or existing policies to be worked on. These include one on communication and reporting, one on financial assistance, one on transgender student protection, one on availability of menstrual products, and one that came up a few minutes ago on equitable access to after-school activities. So people undertook to begin drafting, I think, all of those policies.
Andy, did you just mention tuition assistance?
Pardon?
Did you mention tuition or financial assistance policy?
Yes,
no?
that was the second one.
Okay, sorry, I just missed it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mariah, finance.
Thanks. Finance is meeting next week to discuss the current year Q3 report, as well as we should have an update on the vote, the Tuesday outcome. So we will discuss that as well. And I just wanted to give a accounts payable update. Since the last time I reported, which was the middle of January, there's been $6,316,164.31 in expenditures. And I just wanted to call out one of them that was from last week that I thought was a nice example of partnership that we wouldn't necessarily hear about. But Brookline Metco partnered with the Teen Center to have a group of teens chaperoned by staff from the Teen Center to visit multiple HBCUs during the first weekend, the long weekend of April vacation. And so they got the chance to visit, I believe it was 5 HBCUs during the weekend. They flew down to North Carolina, I believe, to Raleigh, visited 5 different HBCUs. Some of the HBCUs were visits, some of them were visits with the admissions office and even on the spot interviews and offers. And there's at least one student who is very heavily considering one of the offers that they received. And that was a cost share between Metco and the Teen Center. So it's really nice to hear about these kinds of programs and the opportunities they provide students. And I was glad to be able to share it with you all.
Thank you. Suzanne, Government Relations.
Yeah, I just want to remind people that you probably got this in the mail, A Day on the Hill, and it's May 4th. And so sponsored by MASC, and it's basically 9 to 2. So there's a morning program, they give you lunch, and then you can go and visit the legislators, and they'll help you do all that, make that arrangement. So if you're interested, I encourage you to do it. I've done it before. I can't do it this year, but it's worthwhile. Although our people they're always welcoming, so.
Yeah, I second it, even if you can just go for the morning part. I mean, the lunch and we've seen our legislators, so that's
Yeah, we
not
just saw 'em.
critical, and they're on board with what we want. But I think the listening and hearing what's going on in other communities is sometimes very helpful.
Yeah.
I unfortunately also cannot go this year.
All right, negotiations.
Since our last school committee meeting, we've met twice with the BEU to discuss the paraprofessional contract. That was on April 11th and April 25th. These were relatively short sessions. Proposals were exchanged, clarifying questions were asked and answered. And our next meeting will be on May 9th with the BEU.
As mentioned by Andy, who is covering the DEIJ subcommittee update, policy met jointly with DEIJ on April 13th. So I won't go into details and reiterating what Andy already mentioned. The next policy meeting will be on May 8th, where we will likely take up some first drafts on some of the policies that we discussed at that joint meeting of April 13th. Are there any additional liaison updates? Go ahead, Helen.
I just have a question. The Brookline Education Foundation usually has their event now in May. Is that happening? Yes, thank you. I couldn't remember the name. Because that's where the Cavalier Award winners usually are presented.
Right now, I have it on my calendar for the 9th.
Oh,
The 9th of May is what I'm looking at from 3 to 5, but it's just a holder on my calendar right now.
if you could, because then I might switch the capital subcommittee.
Is it at Lincoln again?
It's not showing me where it is right
Okay.
Huh? Yeah, then, oh. Well, maybe if they have an option to do it on another day would be great too, if they haven't said it. Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Is there any new business? Okay, so it was brought to my attention that Mariah was having some audio issues when we were taking the vote on Dr. Fortuna. So I would like to give Mariah the opportunity to vote in affirmation of the hiring of Dr. Jody Fortuna as our Deputy Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. Mariah?
Yes, thank you.
All right, very good. So that makes it unanimous among all those who are present today. Any other new business? All right.
Oh, we don't have,
There is actually no need for executive session tonight. So for those of you who were watching earlier, thank you very much for prioritizing us over the Celtics game, but you can now switch over. And I will accept Suzanne's motion for adjournment. So
he's right.
adjourned.
Recording stopped.
I'm hanging up. Bye, everyone.